streaming.
Yeah, under the clock, but it's really very accurate.
Comments ready to make a point. Yep, talk to me.
You may not want to be in the new seats. That's right. We have an earthquake?
Happening when it wasn't working, but we finally settled on Council Daddy, so she.
Hasn't wanted to be here, but he had to babysit the grandkids because his son was living in our basement of our house. So I said, "No."
Well, we would like to start again and welcome everyone out to our city council session. We would like to call this meeting to order and begin with an invocation by Ty Reiser and then the Pledge of Allegiance by Carol Walker. So if Ty could come forward to the podium. Well, we would like to start again and welcome everyone out to our city council session. We would like to call this meeting to order and begin with an invocation by Ty Reiser and then the Pledge of Allegiance by Carol Walker.
Something's working.
Go ahead.
Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this day. We're thankful for our many blessings. We're thankful for the opportunity to meet here in city council meeting, for the freedoms and blessings of a great country in which we live. We're thankful for those who fight for our freedoms and protect us each and every day through the military, through our police and firefighters. We ask that thou watch over and protect them. I'm thankful for our city staff and city council and mayor for the time and effort that they put in to make our city a great place to live. We're thankful for our families and homes and ask that thou watch over and protect them as we are away. And we ask that that spirit be in our meeting today, that we will be able to communicate our thoughts and feelings in a respectful way. And we're thankful for, again, for all that thou hast given us. These things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We wanted to start out, first of all, by welcoming Sam Lentz and Debbie Leray and Mark Seastrand back on the council dais and as part of the council meeting, and we appreciate having them there as our new council members. We also wanted to make mention that, as you can see, we have a new insignia behind us. and sounding boards. We're working on streaming, live streaming onto the city website. So we're working hard to make improvements for this experience in the city chambers, one where it's visually appealing, but also where you can see on the screens and hear well with what's going on. So, and those that are home that want to watch and hear can do so. We'd now like to go ahead and go through our items. First of all, I would like to seek approval of the minutes of the City Council meeting of November 17th, 2015. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We have some upcoming events that I would like to make mention of. On January the 14th, we have the City of Orem All Together Playground Design Day Community Celebration at 6:30 p.m. at the Orem Senior Friendship Center. This is going to be a great event. We have a design team coming in who is seeking comments from the public. This is going to be a great playground. A lot of people are excited about it. One of the first in Utah Valley, and we would recommend that those who would like to participate please attend. On January the 21st, we have the UVU Veterans Success Center breakfast and ribbon cutting over at the Sorensen Center, and then at the Veterans Success Center in Woodbury, room 100, from 8:45 to 9, and then the official ribbon cutting from 9 to 9:30. On January the 27th, we have the Utah League of Cities and Towns Local Officials Day at the Legislature from 7 to 2. We also have a breakfast. The City Council has a breakfast with the members of the legislature within our community here on Friday, January the 22nd at 8 a.m. Here in this building. Then on February the 13th, Advance Auto Parts is having a ribbon cutting at 9 a.m. and they're located at 1484 North State Street. Just by way of announcement, in the last year, we've had over 60 ribbon cuttings and grand openings. That's pretty exciting for the city of Orem. A lot is going on. We have an appointment to the CDBG Commission. This particular gentleman is Braden Santo. He's 25 years of age. He's lived in Provo and has been living in Orem for quite a while. He recently graduated from Utah Valley University with a bachelor's degree in information technology, and he's looking forward and would like to participate with the city. So I would like to recommend and make a motion that he be appointed to the CDBG Commission. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So tonight we have a special opportunity on item 12 to recognize our state champions, Orem Youth Baseball. And Carl Hurst is going to come forward and make this presentation. So.
Mayor, City Council, Orem City has a long history of producing excellent young athletes. It is my pleasure tonight to introduce some of them to you, our newest. I think we've got a whole bunch of our newest state championship baseball players. We're very proud of our young athletes. I'd like to turn some time over to Rod Sweeten, who's the president of Orem Youth Baseball, to give a little more specifics about these young men.
Great.
Thanks, Carl. First off, we'd like to thank Carl for all the support that Orem City gives Orem Youth Baseball. We've got 3 teams here. Well, to give you an idea, we have about 700 kids that participate in Orem Youth Baseball from 7 to 14 years old. These are kind of the best of the best. These are 3 A-team all-star teams that competed in the Pony League tournaments. Most of them, I think all 3 of them won district prior to competing in the state tournament, and then all 3 of them won the state championship. After that, they were able to represent the state of Utah, Orem City, and Orem Youth Baseball in California in a zone tournament. And we have lots of great comments from these guys. They represented our city well. We have signs that these kids haven't seen yet, but this is one of the reasons they play, is this sign gets hung on our fields. Walk by the fields and you'll see several of these. Kind of puts these kids' names up forever on the ballpark. So this is one way that we feel like we can honor these kids. And we see every year, high school kids, kids that are in their 20s come back and showing their girlfriends or wives their name up on the field.
So Rod, I have a question. How often does it happen that the Pony, Bronco, and Mustang teams win the state championship at the same time?
This is only the second time ever that we've had all three of our teams win.
Well, congratulations. Can we give them a round of applause? So Rod, I would like to come forward and have each team come up and take a picture, and then afterwards I'd like to have them come up and shake the hands of all the city council members.
Great. So let's bring the Mustang team up. The Mustang is age 9 and 10. So Mustang team, come up. If any of their coaches are here, come up with them. Do I have the Mustang? Yes, I have the Mustang.
He's Cuban 9. They grew up fast.
Have all the Mustangs come up here.
Bring back memories, Brent? Does that bring back memories? Yeah, but my name's not up anymore.
I played softball.
It's on the wrestler.
All right, let's bring the Bronco team.
One more picture, hold on. Okay, can you, brethren?
Okay, Bronco is 11.
Nice job. Congratulations. What position did you play? Congratulations. Nice job, young man. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thanks, you guys. Congratulations. Better stay standing. Keyboard. On yours, not mine.
Okay, Tony is 13, 14-year-old.
Nice job.
They are
Congratulations. Congratulations. Appreciate it, guys. Good job. Nice.
Okay, let's come in together. Yeah, why don't you get on the other side of him there? Okay. Okay. Give them a round of applause.
Congratulations. Appreciate you guys. Good job. And hitters there?
Hey, Mayor, one other thing. Can we would like to invite everybody to come out and watch Orem Youth Baseball. Our games pretty much from mid-April until mid-July, we're at the ballpark nearly every night. So we'd love to see you out.
Hey, Mayor.
Yes.
I'd like to recognize, Rod Sweeten and also Todd Monson. They pretty much run Orem Youth Baseball, did an excellent job, and we appreciate their willingness to volunteer.
So let's give them. We love our youth. We love our Orem youth activities. We love Orem Youth Baseball. So that's pretty exciting to have three teams that won the state championship. Again, thank you very much. Jamie, do you have any appointments to boards or commissions? Okay. We'll move on to personal appearances. We have the opportunity to come and speak on various items. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and you give us your name and address when you come to the podium. We'll begin with Jim Hadlock, and he will be followed by Jan Jensen.
Thank you. My name is Jim Hadlock, live at 632 West, 1360 North here in Orem. I've lived in Orem about my wife and I, almost 44 years. And of course, over that time, I've seen lots of changes and continue to. And just wanted to express an opinion here, and this is just from the recent Orem City newsletter that I just received. It says, as a city council, we are committed to making and achieving goals that improve the quality of your life as an Orem resident, which I don't believe is true. I believe that the number one thing in Orem is business and even apartment buildings. Also received was a percent owner occupied housing at 62.4%, and renter occupied housing is 37.6%, which is probably mainly apartment buildings as they continue to be built seemingly by the hundreds. So I do hope that as a city council this year that you do put the citizens first, and if citizens are first, then when a group of citizens don't want something in their community, it shouldn't be approved, because if the citizens don't want it, you shouldn't want it, since you represent the citizens and are elected by the citizens. Particularly with the big apartment complex, I don't know how it's progressing, but I think it's Ivory wants to build it there by UVU, which shouldn't be approved, even though the owners of the land, I'm sure, are anxious to sell that land and get a lot of money, but still the zoning shouldn't be changed, because I know that most of the people in that area of Orem do not want that apartment complex built. And these companies come in like Ivory. They don't live here in Orem. They live up in Salt Lake, I imagine, or somewhere else, and they just want to make money, and that's all it is to them. They don't care about Orem or the people living near those places. So I just hope that this year the city council truly does put the quality of life for the Orem residents first and not second. Another thing, if that was true, that big building up in my neighborhood wouldn't have been approved. That tall office building, which I guess is still going forward, wouldn't have been approved, since the citizens around there were against it, and it poses many problems for them, and certainly it's not going to improve their quality of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Jan Jensen.
Hello. My name's Jan Jensen. I live at 849 South, 600 West. It's a Sunset Heights neighborhood. I apologize, but so it goes. I've lived here all of my life. Orem's always been a wonderful place to grow up. I, like some of you, worked while growing up here, delivering newspapers, picking fruit, working in the family business. After my parents passed away, I purchased their home for my daughter and her family. Because of our love for the area, we built a custom home in the view lot right behind my parents' home in 2004. We believe the city of Orem would maintain the quality of life in this area. I've always wanted to live in this area that I've known so well. My grandfather emigrated from Denmark in 1894, purchased the property in Provo Bench, which is Orem, and cleared the property and began farming. My father served on the planning commission in Orem. My uncle served on the Sierra board. So my family's been committed to Orem years before it became a city. As a child, I was hit by a car on 800 South, right in front of my home. I spent 6 weeks in traction and with compound fractures in both legs. So I understand the importance of that traffic problems can cause. I don't understand why Orem City would consider destroying a wonderful residential area and degrade the Sunset Heights neighborhood with a PD 47 four-story apartment complex with 1,100 students in the first phase of the project. The proposed Deseret Towers building down in Provo is proposing on a 12-acre site is proposing 1,100 students. Ivory & Company proposes 1,100 students on 5.2 acres. It's less than half the size of what BYU is using. It's an ultra high density housing. Our wide our area has always been safe and a crime-free area. Introducing this apartment complex will draw criminal activity into our area, because criminal activity is drawn to high-density housing with its associated parking. Most Orem residents don't want more apartments. Between Orem City and Vineyard, the areas have proved so many, it's hard to imagine that there are going to be that many people. Our city slogan is Family City USA. I went out and did a Google search on that term, and it only comes up with Orem, Utah. We don't want to become West Valley City of Utah Valley, with the accompanying increase of crime rate of 54 crimes per 1,000 residents, which in this instance, if it interpolated over, there'd be 590 crimes in a year just in our area. Traffic is another associated problem. Statistics show that students living in campus make 3.2 trips by car per day. So in this instance, if we figured every student, that'd be 17,000 trips. Boy, I'm slow, I apologize. 17,000 trips, or 35,000, depending on how you calculate it. One way or the other, I want to say, I thank you for your work. I appreciate what Orem City Council does, and I think the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go ahead and close the personal appearance and move on to our scheduled items. We'll go to item number 16 first. This is a continued item from December the 8th, which is to study and look at the sewer base rate. It's an ordinance amending the sewer base rate for multi-unit residential buildings and for non-residential buildings with a water meter size greater than 3/4 inch. Chris Shirkey, our Public Works Department Chairman, and Neil Winterton are here for the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. If you could just give us about 30 seconds here, we'll have this.
And Chris, if you also want to introduce the others that are there with you.
Yes, we have with us tonight a couple members from our Public Works Advisory Commission. If they could stand when I read their names, we have Casey Shaw is the Vice Chairman of the Public Works Advisory Commission. And we have Ty Reiser, our Chairman of the Public Works Advisory Commission. And we have Carol Walker, one of our 7 members of our Public Works Advisory Commission, here with us tonight. Let's see, does everyone have that on your monitors? We also have Keith Larson from Bowen, Collins and Associates here representing us here tonight. I appreciate the efforts of our Public Works Advisory Commission and all that they've been doing for the past 18 months. As you know, they've been charged with the task of evaluating very tough and challenging issues that affect and impact the city of Orem with respect to all services provided by Public Works Department. 2 or 3 of those are utilities regarding master plans. They've been heavily involved with those master plans, the sewer water master plan, the storm sewer master plan, as well as the water master plan. One of the first items of business that they have been asked to look at and evaluate is our sewer rates and how we are applying these sewer rates and distributing costs across the board in the city. This plan that we're proposing here tonight started several months ago. Back in February, we hired a GIS professional to identify all of the non-residential and residential units in the city. The study was completed, then presented to the Public Works Advisory Commission, and subsequently there was a notification sent in December, and on December 8th there was a public hearing held here at the City Council chambers. On the 15th, this was also discussed at the Public Works Advisory Commission with the City Council, there being a quorum in attendance, and other attendees were also present. In January, we sent an additional notification to the public, including one yesterday and Stephen Downs will be presenting on this at this time. But we're here tonight to present this to you for adoption after consideration and any questions you might have at this time. So if Stephen could come up and just address the public noticing and also the advertisement and the flyers that actually went out.
So obviously this is the second time meeting on it, and after the first meeting we chose to renotice that again. For the original meeting back in December 8th, we took a approach a few different ways. We used mail, of course, as one of them, but we also emailed, and this is tied to whatever information is provided to our utility department. So whatever email they may have on file or address. So we sent about 10,100 emails to all utility account holders. Then we sent a specific one to businesses. We sent a specific one to multifamily. We have the open rates on those too. So the open rates were higher than our typical rates. When you say anything about a rate change, that will probably increase your open rate. So we had 63% of our business opened, 55% of our multifamily. We also did a robocall to both businesses and multifamily, and those were, as you can see in the numbers, answered or messages left. We also received a lot of personal phone calls, and then there was a mailer that hit initially as well, and that one didn't come out unfortunately as timely as we had hoped. Some of the delays with the Christmas mail, but then we did mail again after the initial meeting. This hit mailboxes about a week and a half ago. This was sent to a total of 3,010 addresses, and about almost 750 of those addresses are outside of the city of Orem. So these are multifamily owners. These are the people that are the owners and that the utility account is in the name of. So obviously that is a lot of people in surrounding cities, but we had Washington, California, Wisconsin, a lot of different states as well. So we sent it to every address we had on file, and every valid address should have received that. And then we did email as well, a reminder early this week to another 800 accounts, and we had about a 40% open rate on those. So we've done what we feel like we can to reach out, and obviously with the amount of feedback that you've heard, the amount of feedback we've heard, I think the message was received that this is being considered. And so with that, I'll turn the time back to Chris, but if you have any questions about how we reached out or how we notified, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Stephen. Keith Larson from Bowen Collins and Associates has been asked to discuss sewer base rate or sewer rate principles. Their firm provided a technical memorandum that has been sent to each of you for your consideration. That was sent about a week ago. And I'll turn the time over to Keith Larson.
So sewer rates are based on some principles that are established in what's called the cost causation procedure, printed by the entities listed on the screen there. That manual is about an inch and a half thick and contains a lot of things I'm going to try to summarize in about a minute here. Long story short is that the goal of that method is to assign costs of the system to the actual cost of service of each customer. To do that, it organizes it into a number of cost categories. And specifically, it talks about wastewater volume, wastewater strength, use of the system capacity, and then customer-related costs. Now, two of those are variable costs, the wastewater volume and strength, that are tied to how much water you actually use. But those other two are associated with fixed costs, and specifically, I want to focus on the use of system capacity. There is a difference between volume and capacity, or flow. Volume represents the total amount of wastewater produced, whereas capacity represents how quickly that wastewater is used. So, for example, when you flush the toilet, a certain amount of volume of water goes down the drain, 1.6 gallons if you're using a current toilet fixture. But the rate at which it goes down the drain or is produced could be, let's say, 5 gallons per minute. That's a little high for a toilet, but you have a flow rate to the toilet. So what we do is we collect volume costs associated with that variable amount of water we're using, but then we have fixed costs associated with the potential capacity that each connection could use. So when we're talking about a sewer base rate, that's the main principle that we focus on, is not the volume, but the capacity that's being used. And as a result, our discussion tonight is going to focus on the potential capacity used by different types of connections.
Thank you, Keith. So the cost of service analysis that's been performed in the 1998 study, in addition to the principles that Keith has identified, are performed to equitably recover costs from all customers. I received a quote from Greg Stevens, our Orem City attorney, today. I'd like to read that to you. It says, "If someone challenges a city service fee, such as a sewer fee, the ultimate question is whether the fee is reasonable. Courts do not require the fee structure to be the best or optimal solution, but only that it is reasonable." What we're proposing to you tonight is a fee structure that we feel is not only reasonable, but more equitable and fair for the entire community. Quoting from the 1998 water and sewer rate study, it says, "The cost of allocation provides the basis for recovering revenues from classes of customers according to the demand that they place on the utility. So costs were allocated to functional categories for sewer and for water. For example, operating or maintenance, capital, and administrative expenses are all functional categories. Costs were then distributed to customer classes. In the case of water, they're distributed by water meter sizes. There were no customer classes, however, in the study that were recommended for sewer. The functional categories for water included customer service, customer accounts, direct fire protection, base capacity, and peak capacity. So peak capacity, for your information, in the city of Orem, in the end of July, beginning of August, the city will use around 60 million gallons of water in the day. In the winter, probably today, we were at about 10 million gallons per day. The system is not designed for winter water production, winter flows, indoor usage. It's designed for peak. And that is the point that we were trying to make tonight, is peak capacity of a system is how infrastructure is designed, whether that infrastructure is a power facility, Rocky Mountain Power, or Questar Gas, Central Utah Water Conservancy District, water utilities, public purveyors, private purveyors, wastewater utilities, communication utilities. They all use the same principles of cost of services to provide for these peak services. Sewer systems are no different. They're not designed to accommodate average daily flow, but peak flows. In the 1998 water and sewer rate study, the costs of services provided to non-residential accounts have not been equitably recovered through the sewer base rate since the study in 1998. In fact, the study clearly stated that non-residential was not taken into consideration in that study. So what that means is since that time, 1998, those non-residential accounts have been, for all intents and purposes, subsidized by everyone else in the community. The sewer rates were adopted by the city, but not recommended by the consultant. The adopted sewer rates did not consider peak, but rather monthly volumes or averages. And we know that the sewer conveyance and sewer infrastructure is not designed based on monthly volumes or averages, but on peak volumes. On page 15 of the report, it states that 3/4-inch meter customers pay substantially more than allocated costs, while costs are under-recovered from most larger meter-sized customers. What that equates to is subsidization. That is occurring throughout the city. And I would also argue that since that report was made in 1998, that subsidy has increased. In our email from the Utah Apartment Association, it is stated that they would not oppose this change for 3 reasons. I'd like to emphasize the third reason in their study. It states that your new system would be like what everyone else already does. Some have argued that we shouldn't do what somebody else is doing arbitrarily or capriciously, but that we agree with that. We believe that, like others, we're trying to follow cost-causative allocations for fees, for services that are provided to the community. What we are attempting to do at this time is try to make this more equitable, more fair, and follow these financial and engineering principles. At this time, I'd like to turn the time over to Neil Winterton, our Water Resources Division Manager.
Yeah, we appreciate the Utah Apartment Association responding to our change, and we responded back with a couple of things, and their concerns were that we don't have to maintain the sewer laterals, and that we don't maintain the laterals anyway, so that one is not a valid argument. And also, there's no discussion about the peak flow that we are hitting upon tonight. The average household norm is about 3.7 persons, and that can happen in an apartment or it can happen in a single-family home. Likewise, you can have one person in a single-family home and one person in an apartment. You can have 6 people in an apartment in a single-family home. And lastly, again, Orem is the anomaly when it comes to applying these base rates. Last time we presented, we showed this exact slide, and we were accused of not including the volume component of the sewer charge in this comparison. Just take note that there are 10 accounts and 196 living units in this particular example. Taking a sampling, we learned that there's about 4.3 thousand gallons for each unit of a sampling across, and we came up with the total volume bill. So the second two columns show the difference. Now this is a lot of information and a lot of busy, so I condensed it down to the next slide to show that this is what this particular complex would pay more in these communities if it's black. And of course, there's a couple of reds there. Orem's current, Provo is not charging by the unit, but looking to do so. And St. George does not have a volume component to their residential commercial base residential sewer charge.
So, Neil, if I could jump in. So this particular slide here shows what it is like for 10 accounts, 196 living units, comparative between the different cities. So to that point, right now we're $1,700 per month for those 196 units, below what these others are.
We're
under the current.
Yeah, the current, we're $1,700 less than what we would be.
Than what we would be.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If that same complex were in Payson, we would be $4,243 per month less than what they are in Payson.
Okay.
And this is our proposed solution again. You can see there's an inequity of there from 24,000, 60,000 in an extreme case, in unincorporated Santaquin, $144,000 annually.
So if the proposal is adopted, then American Fork is still $5,000 a month higher.
Still $60,000 per year more than what that complex would be charged in Orem, correct? Chris touched upon and Keith touched upon water reclamation fund rates. And this is the same slide, except for I've added one bullet point at the bottom. The same slide that I presented before. There's no exact principle or exact guideline that you have to follow as a legislative body. And the AWWA multipliers are established and accepted and produced to use, but you can modify them as you see fit. And as you saw on the previous slide, different cities, entities, and districts have all chosen different ways to fund their utility. When I got finished presenting that slide, Councilman McDonald said, hold on there, Neil, there is an underlying principle, and that underlying principle is fairness. We don't believe this is a perfect solution, but we believe we're getting closer to the most equitable and fair solution. Since we presented this, we've heard some arguments against our proposal. And some of the some of the comments are that the city doesn't bill each particular unit. The landlord has to collect. And the city doesn't have billing costs for each unit and doesn't read the meter for each unit. Number 3 is the billing should be mostly based on volume. And number 4, the distance between units isn't 80 feet or 100 feet like it is in single-family homes. They're stacked, and therefore there's less pipe out in the road. 5, some meters are sized for landscaping or fire flow or maybe other needs. And so I'm going to present a few options that are out there for you and what we've already discussed, but just for review. Apply a water meter multiplier across every account, whether it's residential or non-residential. Apply a reduction factor for multifamily units, whether that's a percent or maybe a value for all multifamily dwellings. Number 3, charge 100% of the sewer base rate for every residential living unit as originally proposed. Number 4 is to eliminate the volume charge altogether. Number 5, eliminate the volume charge altogether. 6, maybe have a base fee that includes a minimum amount of flow. I'm going to talk about some pros and cons. If you chose the first option where you apply a ratio to every single meter in the city, you're still not going to meet the fair and equitable check when you have a 4-plex or a 10-plex that's on the same 1-inch meter. Number 2, where you add a reduction factor, you could remove the administration costs for billing, and that is a solution that you could do. It isn't number 3, which is as originally proposed, where it's simple and logical, and then the volume equalizes the billing method. Number 4, where you eliminate the volume charge altogether, there's no reward or incentive for conserving. Number 5, when you take out and go straight volume, it doesn't account for that peak capacity that we're talking about. Number 6, the cost of service is placed on the total volume and not the peak if you add a base rate plus maybe some volume. While I'm talking about peaking capacity, I wanted to give you just a quick just a few numbers where our plant treats about 8 million gallons a day. And when we peak at about 10 a.m., and that number's about 13.5 million gallons a day. That's the best case scenario for peaking because that's when it's all done and all brought to the plant. Locally, you can see a 200 or a 400% peaking factor applied to a project or to a particular pipe in the street because we all wake up similar times, take a shower, do a load of laundry, do some dishes. The patterns are predictable, and our numbers show that. We have graphs that show exactly day by day when those peaks come and when they go. So you might ask how much it costs for us to administer the bill in to our sewer utility. The math shows it's about 85 cents per account. I'm just going to give you some numbers, not suggesting that we should do it any particular way. But what would the year 1 volume charge be if we eliminated the base rate altogether? And I'd like to point out year 1. We are in a long haul over the next several years to meet the need of our capital facilities plan. And so although this is year 1 where we're needing to meet some revenues, into the future, we're going to have rate increases for all users in the city. This isn't one and done, as much as I'd like it to be, as I'm sure everyone else would as well. But if we eliminated the base rate altogether, we could charge just $267 per thousand. That would give us $7.6 million in revenue. What if we just decided to eliminate the volume charge and apply a base rate charge? If we just applied that to the 22,000 accounts, it'd be $28.76. If we applied that to all the multifamily units and one business equaling one unit, it would be $21.67 per unit. So what if we just added a volume charge, kept doing what we're doing? We'd have to add 39 cents per thousand to each family And at 9,000 gallons, that's an increase of $3.51. To me, that would perpetuate the inequity that we have and put an unnecessary increase in burden that isn't fair. Eventually, we're going to get there. We're going to add more. We're going to increase the rate to all users to Orem, but we're
But
not.
if you were to increase the volume rate here, you still, as you said, would not address the inequity as far as the base rate goes. So you'd have some paying a base rate, some not paying the base rate, and then everybody would have an increase in a volume charge.
That's correct. So this is the language for the proposed fees and charges. It's the same slide as what we presented before, except for the text that's in red. I'm sure we can all read that just great. But I've blown it up here to add that we'd like to add the language, all non-residential utility account holders for water meter sizes 2 inches and larger may request an adjustment to the multiplier based on qualifying specific criteria. We felt like there are some instances where non-residential meter accounts are possibly sized for fire flows or irrigation or other site-specific needs such as ice making or other specific needs that we could review and apply a ratio adjustment. What's that? Yeah. There are about 400 accounts that are 2 inch and larger, and we felt like that was something that we could manage. So I'd like to finish and let our Public Works Advisory Commission say a few words. So that concludes my portion. If you have any questions for me at this time.
Thanks, Neil. Just a quick word.
Casey, could you identify yourself?
Casey Shaw. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Public Works Advisory Commission. I'm an Orem resident and
Thank you.
lived here a long time. I'm also a professional engineer. The Orem suffers from a condition that is not unique to Orem but common to many cities, and it's called aging infrastructure. Orem is ahead of most cities right now in addressing the needs of replacing aging infrastructure. And they have done it in a very specific way with the assistance, the small assistance of the Public Advisory Commission, to identify each utility, water, stormwater, and sewer, what projects need to be completed in order to make certain that those utilities continue to function in a way that they never show up on the headline of the front page of the newspaper. And that's what these two gentlemen want. These actually are probably the two most trusted gentlemen in Orem, because every morning we wake up and the water they deliver us, we drink, and we never say a word about it. And they're more trusted than the fire chief and the police chief and your bishop and whatever you want to say, because we trust our lives, our health with these two gentlemen. Over the past 18 months, we've identified, with the help of the consultants and city staff, about $1.1 million of projects, specific projects, not just money, that need to be completed in order to keep the utility up to snuff. Somehow this has evolved into a rate fairness discussion. But recall that what we're talking about is a utility maintenance issue. During our discussion, it was noted that multifamily units do not pay a fixed fee. The Public Works Advisory Commission and everyone associated with this realized that apartments produce less wastewater than single-family homes. We know that. That is not news to us. We also know that most every other city charges on a living unit basis. And what Orem does is unique. And looking at that, we determined that it was more equitable. It got us closer to fairness to charge each unit a fixed fee like everyone else does. Because what's happening is you are actually buying into the capacity of the system. there's an equity, there's a cost to that system. And as new units come on, that fixed fee allows you to buy into that asset. And if you do it solely on volume, it can be done, but it's a lot more money on a volume basis. There is no perfect billing method. You are always going to have someone who feels like they're mistreated, and they probably are. There is no perfect billing method available to us currently. But we believe this brings us closer to fairness than just about anything else. And the Public Works Commission supports a billing on a per living unit basis.
Thank you, Casey and Neil. I turn the time over to the council. If you have any questions that we may answer for you at this time, we'd be more than happy to do so.
Chris, I'd just like to reiterate, what is the reasoning behind asking for this change, and what will this do for our infrastructure, our fixed and sunk costs for the future?
Well, before we bring to you the sewer master plan, we felt it was necessary for us to look at any inequities or unfairness that we felt that was real in our current billing system. This process would generate about $1 million, and it would be tied the base rate would be tied to these fixed costs that will occur whether or not we come to work or not. We have about 90% of our costs, the $7 million that we were talking about, are associated with fixed and sunk costs. About 10% or less are associated with variable costs.
What is a fixed or sunk cost?
Well, fixed costs are those that we've already realized in our system that we're paying for even today. So they could include costs for operating and maintenance. It could be equipment and personnel to pay for those costs. And it will also include capital improvements and maintenance of that system into the future. Variable costs are those such as chemicals, fuel, power, other types of variable types of costs that are associated with plant processes or providing the services to the city.
And that would be addressed through the volume rate.
Correct.
And then what, if this change were to go through, how would that affect our facilities, and what would that mean for the future?
We would have a broader foundation from which we can draw and allocate these costs and move forward into the future. It'll help out with our future generations to have, if we go forward with with not borrowing or paying for these costs as we go, then we can ensure that there's a solid system in place for our children and their grandchildren well into the future. That is one of the main hopes and desires of our master planning process, is that we do look at this now and not delay. We have been delaying for many years. We feel like it's time to have a course correction for the benefit of our families and our future generations.
Okay, thank you. Debbie Lorette?
This question is for Casey. As a water engineer, and have you studied studies from 1998? It was stated that there's been a subsidy, that the residential component has been subsidizing the commercial or the non-resident. So can you kind of give me an idea of percentage-wise what that looks like, and has it increased over time?
Back in 1998, before they made the change, they made a change immediately after that. Before that, the fixed fee was about, $9.50, and the volume fee was about 55 cents. And under that scenario, the single-family homes were subsidizing multifamily units by about 7 to 10%. And since then, the cost that was adopted was $5 a month and $1.14 or something like that for the volume flow back in '98. Well, the fixed fee has gone back up now to $9.42, and the volume has only increased up to $1.42. So the inequity has crept back into the system.
So do you have an idea of percentage now?
A lot.
Give me your best guess.
Yeah. Greater than 10%. Okay. Greater than 10%.
I'd like to also add to that, Ms. Luray, that in this study, it also identified that there was an inequity involved with the non-residential, which includes industrial, commercial, and other types of non-residential uses. That wasn't addressed. It clearly identified that that was not addressed here, and since then, we've gone down this road 17 years to this point.
Do you have an idea what that inequity is, percentage-wise? Greater than 10?
I don't have that.
Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you. Brent Sumner.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Commission, for working on this for 18 months. I appreciate your work on it. It's 1.1 million, is that correct, we need to raise? Or this is what this will...
The master plan in year one called for 1.3 million. It was determined that if we made this adjustment, it would generate 1.1 million.
Okay. Of that 1.1, if I understand it correctly, 800,000 is apartments and 300,000 business.
Correct.
Okay, I wonder about the balance on that. Of the people or group that can probably put an increase or pass it on is probably the business. I had Mr. Manning give me, and he didn't identify names of the businesses. He gave me 6, what the bottom line rate difference would be. The first one was $42.78. The second one was $42.78, this is per month. Next one was $187.70. Next one, $88.91. Next one, $23.02. Next one, $42.78. 2 fourplexes rate increase comes to over $60. And that's just 2 fourplexes is more than all these, well, is more than 4 of these businesses that Mr. Manning gave me. So I wonder, how did you come to the conclusion that we should go after the apartment side in this, or not? That's the wrong way to say it, but put the emphasis on the residential over the business. I know many of the businesses up and down State Street won't have an increase at all, correct?
Yes, if they have a 3/4-inch meter, then there'll be no change. So the American Water Works Association multiplier for a 3/4-inch meter is 1.0. If you have a 1-inch meter, then your multiplier, I believe, is 1.67. And then for an 1.5 inches, it's 3.33, and so on, as you see on that chart. What we're looking at here is what amount of volume, not the volume, but the peak that will actually be generated by that account holder, whether it's industrial, residential, commercial, and so forth. As you might imagine, there are many businesses that may have one bathroom facility that it's rarely used throughout the day. Unlike a living unit with a 3/4-inch meter, it's used quite heavily with dishwashers, washers, showers, preparing food, and so forth. So there's quite a difference in indoor water consumption, therefore sewer production. And so we believe that it is fair, that it is focusing on the peak factors of that particular facility or account.
Let me also add that if you're a commercial restaurant, you also pay for your strength through our pre-treatment program. And so it's not the end of your sewer bill at base rate and volume if you're a restaurant or an auto shop. You pay for your strength as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Spencer.
So, Chris, you mentioned peak capacity, and maybe you could explain what that means and maybe give us an analogy of peak capacity maybe we can understand on layman's terms.
Well, so like I mentioned, in the summertime in Orem, collectively throughout the community, we will utilize or use or produce 60 million gallons of water. So that's a peak value. We don't produce that kind of volume today or those kinds of peaks today. They're about 10 million gallons. So it's about 6 times what you'll see the average in a month in the wintertime. Likewise, at the water reclamation facility, it's rated at about 13 million gallons for peak, and we actually peak higher or about that, and then our average flows today are about 8 million gallons. So although it's treating 8 million gallons a day, we have a peak flow that comes in at certain times, and it's from day to day. You can look at the diurnal data. Although we might have an average of 8, we might peak at around 13. So those are two examples. The power facility here in Vineyard, I'm not sure what that's rated at, but I do know that it was designed for peak capacity, meaning if you wanted to turn on an air conditioner in the summer when everyone else wants to turn on their air conditioners, if it were designed for average capacity, you would not be able to access your AC unit. Likewise, if we designed our sewer system for average capacity, not for peak capacity, if we designed it for average, then we would have sewer backups that would occur every day throughout the city of Orem. So our infrastructure is designed to handle, collect, and convey the peak volume, peak flow.
Yeah, you'd have to take turns using the bathroom spread out through the day. Not everybody would be able to utilize the sewer system all at once at 8 a.m. Another analogy would be that if you took the volume of the water that you use in your home throughout the month, you could get by with a tube the size, an ice cream maker, or an ice maker size tubing, a little 1/4-inch tubing. You could feed your overall monthly volume with that flow. But you need your 1-inch or 3/4-inch sized to account for that immediate need that you have. So Casey once said that he has a car that goes 120 miles an hour and it has the power to do so. He had to pay for that power to be able to do that. He doesn't use it all the time, but when he needs it, he needs it.
Never.
And Jamie, you had an analogy about the mall?
Well, just for example, in another vein, when shopping centers or, for example, the University Mall, when they look at parking requirements, they don't design to what is needed on January 12th. They design to Black Friday. They design to the Saturday before Christmas to accommodate what they anticipate to be the highest traffic flows during, for example, a given commercial period, the holiday season, for example. So when you drive by the mall parking lot tonight, you're probably going to see a lot of spaces vacant. But if you were there 3 weeks ago during the holiday season, you would have a hard time finding a spot. The same principle is applied to parking and capacity that is applied to water, wastewater, and capacity.
Thank you.
So, Casey, I just wanted to check with you as we have talked about what we're examining here and what we're looking at is similar to what other cities do, because other cities face the same responsibilities and the same costs, similar costs to what we do, maybe not the same, but similar. And if we are not preparing for the future, if we're not updating our system, if we're not planning for peak flow with the increase in growth in our city, then our ability to handle that and treat that sewage will not be there. Could you maybe make a couple of comments on that?
Just 2 comments to that. There are 2 ways to handle this. You can pay as you go and accumulate funds and stagger projects and needs according to the funds you have, or you can bond. And I can tell you that you will bond if you do not do something now. And the aging infrastructure issue is a real issue. The second issue is that we work with a great number of cities where I work. I work for the Central Utah Water Conservancy District. And I can tell you that Orem is in the top 1% of those that look ahead and try to plan and do those things that will allow maintenance and upkeep and expansion of the system at the lowest possible cost. Other cities are of the opinion that they will bond when a problem comes. And Orem has been very good at trying to pay as you go.
And I think we've seen that kind of example with Ogden. Are you familiar with what's occurred there?
Yes, and if you would Google water main breaks, you will find that Salt Lake City has had a tremendous number of water main breaks over the past couple of years because they face the same system that we're going to. Their system is just older. And unless you address that, you're going to be every week addressing a water main break or a sewer backup somewhere.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to that as well. We have had the philosophy that we would bond as needed too, and we bonded back in about 2005 and 2008, and we accumulated about $53 million of debt that we are for the three utilities, for water, sewer, and storm. That includes principal and interest. And so, in other words, we may have been able to pay for that with about half as much money had we had a pay-for-your-go plan in place. So there are merits, perhaps, for bonding. There may be times, there's a hybrid approach in the long term. For larger projects, we may want to bond for like a 10 million gallon tank that might cost us $10 million. But if we have a pay-as-you-go approach, we can handle all of the main infrastructure in the city and the streets on an annual basis. We feel like we have a sound, fiscally responsible and responsible engineering plan in place that we're going to be proposing to you over the next several weeks.
Thank you. Councilmember Lentz.
So I've heard from several renters, I think some of whom are here with us tonight, that are concerned about their rent. And most of them are not billed by the city. Their landlords are billed, and then that is essentially built into the cost of their rent. My understanding is that rent is typically based off of market prices, not necessarily the sum of all of the costs of providing that. So my question to the panel would be, are renters expected to bear the majority of this cost? Will it be borne by the landlords? Will it be shared? How will this impact rents here in Oregon?
Well, I can't speak for them. They can speak for themselves, but I would assume they would pass that cost on to the renters. So those that hold the actual account, who might own several units with one account, they would normally or typically pass that along.
If the landlord would share with me their profit and loss statement, I'd be more than willing to help make a recommendation on that.
But all of the living units within the city of Orem are going to be affected equally as far as if they don't pay a base rate, this change would ensure that they do pay a base rate. If they're already paying it, they don't increase their base rate or add another one to it, correct?
That was a long...
That's fine. You don't
Could you restate that for me, please?
It's okay. It's all right. Yes, Jamie.
If I may, I think an important consideration as part of this overall conversation, and I believe this is to Mr. Shirkey or Mr. Shaw's point, we have a $1.1 million nut that we need to crack. And that nut will be cracked in terms of funding for future infrastructure. It will be funded either on the base rate or it will be funded in the variable rate. So the question as to who is going to bear that increase in cost, the answer is regardless of where we put it, there is going to be an increase in cost. So it's going to be necessary, for example, whether it's a landlord or a homeowner, to account for those additional costs because we're talking about additional infrastructure. So I'm not necessarily sure you can make the representation that if, for example, we don't assign it to the base rate, this $1.1 million nut is going to disappear. No, the recommendation, or then what we would do is return to the drawing board and try and find a different way to fund that 1.1 million, and it would probably find its way into the variable aspect of the rate, the volume charge, which brings me back to Mr. Shaw's point. Is that necessarily fair? And he has spoken to the merits of whether that's fair or not.
Thank you. Councilmember Sumner.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing that has not been talked about in our work sessions, or to my knowledge, not at all, is the franchise tax will be increased as well on this. Maybe you can think about that. I got one more question. As far as the response to Mr. Lentz, will the rents, landlords don't pay rents. he will pass it on, and there's no doubt about that. And that concerns me very much too, because this audience that we're going after, most of them are young people, a lot of them making minimum wage. In fact, I don't know how accurate this is, we got an email yesterday, all of us did. A landlord told his tenants that the monthly rent would be going up about $80 a month. And I know that's a lot more than $932, but it's just not going to go up the increase that the city gives the tenant or the landlord. So yeah, I just wanted to stress that the tenants will pay that. There's no doubt about that.
Regarding the comment on the franchise tax, the percent will stay the same, so that's 6%, and that'll be applied across the fees for services that were provided.
Okay, and the way I calculated for a fourplex, that's approximately $2.60 increase.
932 times 3 times 6% is what that would be. Because you'd have 3 additional base rate.
Yeah, so
3 times that times 6%.
It's about $2 more.
Okay. Right.
So it's my understanding that in most cities, each living unit pays the base rate. We see that, for example, in the cities of American Fork, Pleasant Grove, Linden, Springville, Payson. So I think it's important to realize that what we're proposing is to put in place that which is the norm throughout the industry or the cities within our area. And with regards to that, I wanted to read something that Mike Collins had written of Bowen and Collins. He states, "The need for infrastructure is directly proportional to the potential use of capacity in the system. As a result, the proposed change will better align rates with the need for infrastructure. The individual residential homeowners in Orem have been paying more for the sewer system, or paying the base rate, over the past decades than equivalent multifamily units who have not been paying the base rate, even though they both result in the same potential use of capacity and corresponding need for infrastructure to the city. The proposed change will result in all customers of the city's sewer system paying equitable base rates. The city is planning on increasing the sewer rates over the next 5 to 10 years throughout the entire city once the subsidy issue is resolved. Before raising these rates, it was felt that any inequities in the city's rate structure needed to be fixed first." So I don't see this as trying to pick on any one area of the city. What I see is that we're trying to bring everybody up equal, and that all pay a base rate and then they pay a volume rate. Is that correct? And the need to maintain our infrastructure is great. It's interesting that we enjoy roads that we've had that were built before. We enjoy water systems that were built before. We have a sewer system that works well, that's been built before. The water treatment plant has been put in place. The reality is, if we're going to pass on those assets to future generations, if we're going to keep those current together with the growth, we have to invest. And we have to invest in this infrastructure. And to do so, we need to go ahead and bring this equality in throughout our city. And so that is the reason for this. So we're not trying to raise any particular rate. We're trying to make people and living units equal. It's interesting when we look at apartment complexes, when we bill apartment complexes, we bill them in this proposal, we would bill one unit through our billing system, but the additional units could be changed a little bit with a discount or deduction off of their rate, as that is, their costs are being billed through that one particular system to that building. So we had talked about the idea of trying to do a reduction of what you have figured out is 85 cents per account. So on the base rate, the idea being that the first base rate for an apartment complex be the present base rate, the remaining ones be 85 cents less, since they do not need to pay for the billing structure per se. And that, I think, is a recommendation that I would make. Yes, do you have a comment on that?
No, I agree. These are the fixed, or these are the direct costs that are billed to the sewer utility, and they are in direct relation to the utility billing, and so we believe that 85 cents is a good representation of what that would be on a per account basis.
So my thinking would be is that we would take that 85 cents off the $9.32 rate for all of your apartment units beyond the first one in a particular building. And that would cover and take away the extra cost for the utility billing charge. I think it's important when we look at this to be fair, also to be fair to the city that is required to handle the capacity that the citizens put on it and that they expect. So if we're not investing, for example, in snowplows, if we're not investing in fire trucks, if we're not investing in police cars, we are not able to handle the needs of the citizens. Likewise, if we're not investing in our infrastructure in our sewer system, we will not be able to handle the needs for the future. So I feel like that while this is not an easy thing to do, this is a very necessary thing to do to keep our system current and in proper repair. I'd like to turn some time over to Councilmember Lentz.
Can you speak to how we plan to address hotels, hospitals, assisted living facilities, and accessory apartments, and how did we arrive at that?
The non-residential component of this is tied to the American Water Works Association water meter multiplier, and that's shown on this table right here. So if there was a commercial or any type of non-residential facility, they would be billed for an equivalent water rate, or excuse me, based on the equivalent water meter size. If they had a 4-inch meter, what we're proposing is that they would be allowed to request an adjustment to their multiplier based on qualifying site-specific criteria. Such criteria would include landscaping, so any water that's applied on their yard or at their facility on the outside that will not make it into the sewer system, we would evaluate what's being used inside that facility and rely on our professional here, Tamara Beardall, who is very familiar with the international plumbing code, and we would be able to determine what the equivalent meter would be for that facility. So if they had a 4-inch but only needed a 2-inch for indoor consumption, their rate would be 3.33 times, not the 10 times, or excuse me, the 20 times that shows up here for a 4-inch. So that addresses commercial. As we looked at hospitals and care facilities, the kind of a litmus test we were looking at there is where does somebody have their mail sent? Where is their address? And for a long-term care facility, we would treat that as a residential unit. It's much like an apartment or much like a condo, and they would have similar peak demands. Now for a hospital that might have a 6-inch or an 8-inch or multiple 6-inch meters, they would be billed for that 6 or 8-inch or for any water that's consumed on the inside of that facility. Nothing that's on the outside, nothing that is accounted for fire flow, or for any other water-based product, like an ice product, like a meadow gold, or a nursery, where they're watering and irrigating, they would have a reduction there and be able to apply for that.
And for the purposes of our discussion, we're treating accessory apartments as living units as well.
Correct. There are less than 1,000 living units that are affiliated with accessory apartments in the city of Orem, legal accessory apartments.
Thank you. Councilmember McDonald.
Had a point of clarification for you, Mayor. You had suggested that on a multiple apartment it'd be $9.32 and some amount less for each one until the new meter, not how many apartments in a complex, right? Each meter would start at $9.32, and then how many piggyback would be some reduction off that? Is that what you're suggesting?
I was suggesting that it was per complex, but Chris, maybe we could get a clarification from you.
Regarding the 85-cent reduction? So that's what it takes to read a meter and the cost associated with utility billing.
Yes, I'm sorry.
So there'd be an 85-cent reduction after
per meter.
After the first
32. That's what I thought you were saying, Mayor. I wanted to clarify. And I've been on this committee now for a year plus. I've had the privilege of being the city council representative to it. And I've been grateful for the quality of people who are on this committee, but I've also been very well educated over the last few months as this became a very public issue. And we've received more emails on this than many others for quite some time, and I've had a chance to visit with many apartment owners as well as apartment residents. I think it is fair to say that a typical apartment and a typical house have a little less stress on the infrastructure. Now, the fact that my wife and I are the only two in our home now, and if we were in an apartment, we'd consume the same amount. We are not a typical homeowner, and we weren't a typical homeowner for the first 30 years of our married life when we were a typical homeowner for the first 30 years of our life when we had children, and we're doing more wash and creating a greater infrastructure demand. But I think some reduction for the second and third meter, whether it's 85 cents or some other amount, Mayor and City Council, is indicative of the fact that there is a somewhat, on an overall average, less of a demand in an apartment complex than there is in a home. Some homes have multiple washing machines. Most apartments only have one, if any. Some homes have 6 or 7 bathrooms, showers, and toilets, and most apartments only have 1 or 2. And so some reduction for that second and third tag along on that meter, I think, is built into this, whether it's 85 cents or $1.25 or some other amount. I don't know that I know that. I assume we'll come to that decision. But hopefully the apartment owners will acknowledge that the fixed fee of the $932 or $942, I've gotten Chris.
$932.
$932. I've heard both numbers. I thought it was $932. If I have one house picked up to that and I'm paying $932 and someone else has 10 or 20 or 82 houses hooked up to that, I think that's pretty clear that they're not using 1/10 or 1/80th as much. There is some reduction. I don't know what that is, but some reduction, I hope, will bring this closer to fairness. Not perfection, has been indicated, but some reduction for that second and third. And so I've been a proponent of that, and hopefully we'll come to some kind of conclusion today.
Thank you. Councilmember Seastrand.
Thank you. This is where the rambling begins, so take a good seat, cross your legs, and get ready. 3 minutes, is that what I have? So first of all, there's been a lot of documents to review on this. I mean, I've done my best to go back and to look at the 1998 agreements. I've looked at the recommendations from the engineers and from the Public Works Committee. I've read a number of emails. I wish I could have talked with each individual that sent the emails, or at least had a chance to have a dialogue there. I have listened and made notes of your issues and your concerns. Had a chance to visit with a number of apartment owners, visit some on the phone, some in person. So first of all, I'd like to say is I do appreciate that there has been a significant amount of communication, discussion, and thought sharing coming from the perspective of the apartment owners, as well as people that live in apartments, as well as some of the businesses that were uncertain. And I've made a list of all those issues. I've tried, from my perspective, to go through and look at those issues and assess them from a standpoint of what makes sense to me and what seems fair and what seems to be the right approach. I think coming out of it is clearly there is a fair amount of variety in both in homes and apartments and who lives there and how many people live there and to what degree they utilize the service. And as was mentioned by the committee, I don't know that it's possible to have a completely 100% fair system. But I do think there's a possibility that we can get a little closer in an overall fair system with some of these changes that have been addressed. And if I can just kind of reiterate what I understand the issue to be, in light of the concerns that have been expressed to me from the residents, that may help me just solidify my summation and my summary in a way that helps me to make a better and a well-informed decision. So my thought process is this: similar to what happens with the water systems in the summer. In order to provide enough water for lawns and for homes and for businesses, that the city generates or needs to be able to process and store and distribute and maintain water pressure for approximately 55 to 60 million gallons of water a day. And so we have wells, we have water that we've purchased from a variety of sources, we have springs, we have treatment plants, we have storage facilities, we have pumps that are pumping all the time. And I know that's what we try to do in maintaining a water system is to say that we're going to keep the pipes working, the pumps pumping, the storage working, in order that when you turn on your system, the water comes out with adequate pressure to be able to service your needs. Whether you're in a home, whether you're in an apartment, whether you're in a business, we try to make that service, and we have to size and structure our service to be able to meet that peak demand flow. And we have a similar system with the sewage treatment, other than it doesn't change from summer to winter, it changes from hour to hour. And at certain times during the day when everybody's up and when everybody's using the system, when they're showering, when they're cooking, when they're using the restroom, that's generating a peak volume that the sewer system has to be able to adapt to and has to be able to handle. I shudder to think of what would happen if we run out of sewer capacity at a certain hour of the day and it doesn't quite go down the shower like we hoped it would, or some other derivative. Clearly, we have a responsibility as a city, and need to as a city, to maintain adequate capacity supply, that for each of you that have bathrooms and kitchens, that when you need to use those, that they work effectively and they don't back up into your homes or into your personal property. So along those lines, I'd use the analogy of my parents. My father's 91, my mother's 87. They live in a home that was built in the 60s. It has 2 bathrooms and 1 half bath. And usually they only use 1 bathroom and they have 1 kitchen. And for the most part, it's pretty similar to what we would see in a lot of homes of that size. They pay the $9.32 for their connection for their peak capacity, because there are times when all the kids come over and we have a big Sunday dinner and we'll use all the bathrooms and we will use all of the kitchen, and we'll fully utilize the capacity of that system. And I think that would be similar to the case of, say, a fourplex. We're in a fourplex. There are 4 individual units. There are 4 families. Some of them are 2 individuals. Some of them are 4 individuals. Some of them maybe more, maybe less. There's a variety there. But in that fourplex, there's at least 4 bathrooms and 4 kitchens, maybe more. And those all individual units need to be able to access the system fully and completely at the appropriate time. And currently, that system of 4 kitchens and 4 bathrooms is paying the same rate as my mother and father, who are in one single house. That whole fourplex pays $9.32. And then the equalizer, to a small degree, is that while it doesn't address the peak issue, it addresses the usage. That because it's my mother and father, they don't use a lot of water, so their usage portion of the bill would be less, and as it could be with any of those individual fourplexes. So as I see it, that there's 2 parts to the bill that we're trying to consider. One is the usage aspect that does take into consideration the various sizes of your family member, the various sizes of your visitors, the various sizes of what you physically use. And then there's the capacity connection, which is, I think, the aspect that is where the inequities have been applied. That in a single-family home, they pay the $9.32. In a fourplex or an 8-plex or a 12-plex, in some cases in 30 or 40 units, they just pay the 1 capacity connection. And that's where this aspect is trying to make that adjustment or that address, is to say we still have to address or plan on 4 individual units that are utilizing the system at the same time, yet they're only paying the 1 access fee or the 1 peak capacity fee. Does that kind of summarize, I guess, from the committee, the way, the intent of the proposal coming through?
Yes.
Okay. And so some of the questions that said, well, wait a minute, if there's only one of us, we should only have to pay the same as if there's a small amount. I think the thing is, we don't know how many are living in individual units. Some units could have a lot, some could have a few, but regardless, the capacity needs to be there to address the number of bathrooms and the number of kitchens that are in that unit. And so that's priced appropriately, that if it's just one of you, you'll pay a lower usage rate, but if you have the equipment there, you can still utilize that in full with the 932. There were a number of comments about how the current system seems fair. Personally, as I've looked through it, I can see where the unfairness or the inequality is in terms of how the system is working, and that there does need to be an adjustment on the base rate for the multifamily housing. I also see it from a business standpoint as well. I think we've tried to address that issue with how businesses also were paying the same 932 rate, when in reality their access or capacity was much greater than what was needed, and so we're addressing that as well. There was a number of questions about, well, you should do it just based on one bill. If it's one bill, then you should only charge 1 access fee. If I were a smart individual, and I would say, well, then it would make sense to say, let's just have the city contract, or let's have somebody contract out, and they collect all the bills, and the city just bills one individual, and that individual does all the rest of the billing. Then the city would receive just 1 access fee of $932. If you take it to the extreme, that doesn't seem fair, that doesn't seem right. So again, I kind of come back to this aspect of, it isn't a matter of based on how many bills that are sent out. It does seem to be more fair when it's based on a matter of dwellings, number of housing units that are associated with it, because that addresses the capacity requirement we need to keep our entire system working. There were a number of other aspects. One of the things I would like to just mention was I received a number of emails that was very concerned about the communication, either the timing or the tone, that the intent was to say that, that the apartments aren't paying their fair share. As I go back and look at it, I think that is the challenge, that from a usage standpoint, that is fair. That aspect of the bill seems to be working effectively. The part that hasn't been fair has been the access or the connection portion, which is what the intent of the messaging was. So I don't think there was an intent to make the message the problem. I think the intent was to communicate that there is a disparity here, and that's part of what this review process is about, is to try to equalize that and make that a little more effective. So that just kind of goes a little bit with some of the thoughts that I've gone through. Again, I appreciate all of the information that's been presented. I appreciate the information here. I would love to entertain, though. I do think there is some equity or some consideration for, it does save us from a billing standpoint to not have to bill 4 individual units as opposed to 1. There is some potential savings in terms of from a capacity standpoint. So I would be very interested in understanding or looking at some modified version of how that base rate would be administered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lentz.
So on that front, I was looking at the mailer that was just sent out this last week to those property owners. I was looking at option 2, where it's kind of what we've been talking about, where additional units on that same bill would receive consideration for a discount of effectively 20%, which would come from 932 down to, I think it's 746. It's kind of small on my sheet, but is that right? 746. So that's a difference of about $1.86 a month for each of those units. And we talked about the billing administration, which is about 85 cents a month. So are there additional considerations where the city is actually saving as far as costing goes for those additional units, whether it's, I'm not sure if it's maintaining fewer meters and fewer connections there? I'm just wondering how we get from the 85-cent billing administration number to the $1.86 discount that was proposed in the mailer.
That was just created for conversation, for an option. The 20% was suggested that we talk about it. It was never mathematically derived.
So one thing I wanted to mention with regards to that is, as we look at the rates and as we consider what we're doing, we can take the rates down to a low level or keep them where they're at, but in the process, the amount of money generated that we need to take care of our infrastructure is lessened each time. And so while I feel it's important that we go ahead and look at the 85-cent deduction, I am not comfortable with the $7.46 per month on the other 3 units. I feel like that is too far. So for a matter of discussion, and I'm not ready to make a proposal yet, but I would like to look at the idea of eliminating $1 off of the remaining units, like in a fourplex. So you'd have 1 meter and at $9.32, and then if you had the other 3 units at $1, which would be $8.32, you'd effectively be looking at probably somewhere 800,000 total that we would be knocking off of the 80,000 total off the 1.1 million approx.
Correct.
And if we continue to go down lower, I think we're defeating what we're trying to accomplish here. But at the same time, we want to be fair. And again, on the billing cycle, I don't think that we need to charge that charge for the additional units. So it's not necessarily, Tom, as we talked about, on a per meter. It's actually, the meter would go, say, to the fourplex, and it'd be the other units in that complex. So if you had a complex that had 2 meters, but you had 20 apartments, you'd charge the $9.32 for the first living unit, and then you'd charge the $8.32 for the remaining living units, to be clear. Sound correct, Casey?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, but I'd like to have discussion from the council. Any thoughts or concerns? Councilmember Laura?
All right. Option 2 was actually my suggestion. Part of it was taking into the fact that the billing, and also but some of it was also goodwill, and so and the 20%, which is something that I asked that you guys look at, and so that's where that originated. What that percentage off is, I don't know exactly. Maybe it is too much, 20% off, but it was something that I originated, recognizing that there is a little bit of difference of cost, whether it's billing, whether it's dealing with some fairness or capacity. So I just wanted to know option 2 was my suggestion.
The 20% would be then 20% reduction would be 640,000 from the 800,000. Just so you have an idea there. The 85 cents equates to 9.1%. The dollar equates to 10.7%. Just to give you an idea what the percentage is.
Well, I'm more comfortable with 10%. One thing I wanted to mention, I just out of curiosity, I went across to my neighbor's house before coming to this meeting. So my sewer bill this last month, my family ended up using 8,500 gallons. My neighbor across the street, same neighborhood, a retired couple, ended up using less than 1,000 gallons. So while sometimes we can say that apartments use less than homes, which they may do, there are a lot of homes with single people, widowed people, retired couples, et cetera, that I think use less than apartments with families in the apartments. So as has been mentioned, it's very, very hard to sit there and say, what's fair to go this way, what's fair to go that way. I think we really need to look at it and say, to be really fair in the city, we should be charging a base rate for every living unit, which is what the proposal is before us, and in my opinion, take $1 off for billing purposes past the first bill that's gone to that particular unit. And like I say, I think if we start to drop it down to 20% or 30%, we start to defeat our reasoning for doing this. Also, then it becomes inequitable again with the residential homeowners. So anyway, Councilmember Sumner.
I'd just like to make it very clear to the commission that I understand we need new revenue and we need for infrastructure, and I fully support creating that. But my concern is, again, let's look at a fourplex, a 25% increase. That's huge. I mean, that's quite a jump. I don't think, I looked at some of my old utility bills, I don't think in 30 years I've ever had a 25% increase in my utility rates of Questar or any one of them. So I support what we're trying to do here, but I just think it's a little too much increase all at once.
Thank you. Councilman.
Yeah, as I was looking through my notes, one of the other issues that kind of came up, or thoughts from some of the real estate owners, was that there is a vacancy factor, that in a single-family home, if it goes vacant, there is the possibility that you can shut off the utilities until it becomes utilized again. Well, I don't know that happens too often, because it seems like you still keep the power on in a number of your utilities. And I do think in that state, if we shut it off, there's also a reconnection fee that adds some additional cost. There could be some consideration, though, or some factor that would have a small vacancy potential, I guess, that may be part of that dollar or part of that factor that pushes that up, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'm actually ready to make a motion at this point. I would like to make a motion that the Director of Public Works, that the City Council by ordinance with an effective date of July 1st, 2016, charge a sewer base rate for each residential living unit, starting with the first one in an apartment complex of $9.32 and those afterwards of $8.32, and amend the sewer base rate for non-residential buildings having a water meter size greater than 3/4 inch. Am I missing something, Greg?
Just one point of clarification. Mr. Shirkey recommended an extra sentence in footnote 2 to the rate schedule, and that wasn't included in the ordinance that was proposed to you. Did you intend to include his added sentence?
I do not remember that particular sentence. I'm sorry.
So this was related to
it's the ability to review non-residential utility accounts.
Okay.
To see if an adjustment's needed.
So I will add that to review all non-residential utility account holders for water meter sizes 2 inch and larger to see if an adjustment to the multiplier based on qualifying site-specific criteria is needed. We okay, Greg? Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and start with Councilmember Spencer.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Okay. The ordinance passes. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Chris and
Thank you.
Neil and Casey. We actually had the public comment portion in our last meeting, and we spent the last 5 weeks, 4.5 weeks, holding meetings and meeting with people and having emails. That was the purpose of the last 4.5 weeks.
I wasn't notified about the meeting in December until after the meeting. Yeah, it was over. The fire came to my house 2 days after the meeting was held.
Right, I understand. We actually had that time period for contact between anyone who wanted to contact the City Council to bring up their comments. We held a Public Works Advisory Commission meeting a week later. We've had a lot of contact with people who had questions and comments. The public portion of the hearing actually was closed, but we continued on the process of discovery and discussion for the next 4 weeks. And so that was the reasoning behind that. So.
Well, I think we've ramrodded in this here because we were not, I thought we'd come to a public meeting like this, we can give some input.
This, I apologize. This was a continuation of the meeting that we held in December, and we requested that anyone who wanted to have discussions and contact do so. We've had a lot of emails. I can tell you that the council has a lot of contact with a lot of members of the community in discussing what this is. We've put a year's worth of work into it. We've tried to make it open for everyone to have discussions with the council, with the advisory commission, with Public Works over the last month and a half. So, thank you.
Give our input as citizens of the city.
Yes.
We give it right here.
No, you can.
I got through email or phone call. We're supposed to talk here in front of you, right in front of you.
So you're welcome to contact us for the last month. Come to our offices, visit with us. We had a public hearing where we had a lot of people come and speak a month ago. Again, we had public at the Public Advisory Commission meeting. We've had public contact with, I think, all of the city council members. I apologize if you did not realize that you could contact us, that we had public discussion going on for the last month with regards to this particular topic. So this was a public hearing, but it had been continued into this particular period. So anyway, thank you. We'll now go ahead and move on to our next ordinance, which is item number 17, a public hearing on building projections and setbacks, amending section 2268C3 and section 2268E of the Orem City Code pertaining to permitted projections into setbacks in a residential zone. Jason Bench will be our presenter.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Before you tonight, we do have an amendment to the ordinance that would allow for projections into the setback. Right now, we do allow bay windows, box windows, and things like that, but there is no specific definition of what that means. We've had over the last couple of years that I've dealt with developers and builders coming in and actually want to build those projections but not have a box window that's above, but actually use the space all the way down to the foundation. And we've basically, based on our interpretation, have not allowed that to occur. And so the last couple of months, we've had several builders come in and say, well, why can't I use that? So we've proposed to come forward with an actual ordinance amendment that would allow a projection into that setback, but put some parameters on that projection so that we limit to the number of projections into the setback. We're not limiting the number of bay windows or box windows, only those that actually project into that required setback. And so this ordinance tonight clarifies that. We're allowing 2 projections, only one per side, 2 feet, 24 inches, maximum width of 10 feet, but it has to be cantilevered or projected over the foundation. The foundation itself cannot go into the setback. Only the structure, as cantilevered, can go into the setback. For example, this would be a cantilever projection into the setback. You can see those 2 examples. Here's another 2 examples of what we're talking about in this ordinance for you tonight. So as you can see on this portion, if I can get my pointer to work. So if you have a 10-foot setback, the main structure itself has to meet that 10-foot setback, but that projection of 10 feet by 2 feet could project as long as it cantilevers into the setback and the foundation doesn't go all the way down into that setback. And so that was our proposal tonight. It gives more clarification of the ordinance and gives the builders some parameters to actually have utilize that square footage and not just the box window, but actually square footage on the floor as well. So we did review it with the Planning Commission, and they recommended that the council approve this proposal. So any questions that I can address?
Jason, maybe you could answer the reasoning behind this proposed ordinance. Bring it to us at this particular time. Have you noticed issues? Are people having problems?
Over the past several years, we've had builders come for us and wanting to do this, but our interpretation is that you cannot do that. It has to be the box window where it actually sits up above and doesn't have the square footage or the floor space that goes all the way down to the floor. And so because we've had a lot more people ask for that type of thing, we've had to deny. We thought, well, maybe now it's time to actually set these parameters, come forward with some options to allow them to use that space. If we're going to allow a bay window or a box window to go in the setback, you might as well allow the square footage of the floor to be utilized as well. And so that was our intent to bring this forward.
So do you see any issues that oppose this or any problems with this?
No.
I know staff is recommending it, but...
We're recommending it, and we're actually limiting it to only one per side. So they can have a maximum of 2 of these projections on a house. One has to be, well, it couldn't be 2 on the same elevation. It would have to be the side and the rear, or the 2 different sides. You couldn't have both of them on the same elevation. It does add some element of architectural features and things that maybe would allow, rather than a flat elevation, to have some type of projection or pop out to make it look a little more architectural.
Thank you. Councilmember McDonald.
Jason, I need some help with the basic math, okay? If my setback is 20 feet, for sake of argument, whatever the rules are, those setbacks don't change for the foundation and the bulk of the house.
Correct.
And as long as the foundation doesn't extend, it's just a base window. How far out can it go? If my setback were 20, can this bay window stick out 3, 4, 5 feet? I realize there's an engineering limit on how far it could stick out.
So on this example right there, the side setback on this example is 10 feet.
Okay.
The maximum you can go in any projection is 24 inches into the setback.
Okay. So if it's 20 feet, I can still only go out 2 feet from the house, right?
Right.
Okay.
If you are at that setback. So if you're at the 20-foot mark and it's 20 feet,
Yep.
you can still only go 24 inches into the...
Now, if I'm 24 feet back, I can come as far out as, well, I can come up to that 2 feet.
Right. We're not stating anything you can or can't do within that buildable area. You can do whatever you want. It's
Thank
just when you get to those
This is
setbacks.
clear, and this slide had been gone. I didn't catch it quick enough. Thank you.
Any other, Councilmember Lentz?
Was there a reason for the 2 per building and 1 per side limitation?
It was just our intent to not have multiple. I mean, basically, right now we don't allow any projections into a setback other than the box window or bay window. If we're going to allow this to go all the way to the floor, allow it to go 10 feet, we figured we wouldn't really want 2 of those projections on one to utilize basically the whole entire width on one elevation. We thought it would break it up and have that as another option.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, this is a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and open it up to the public at this time. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and your address for anyone who wishes to make a comment. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public portion of this hearing and bring it back to the council. Any comments from the council?
I'll make a motion if there's no comments. I move that the City Council amend Section 22-6-8C3 and Section 22-6-8E of the Orem City Code pertaining to the permitted projections into setbacks in a residential zone.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Spencer.
Aye.
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 Okay, the ordinance passes. We'll now move on to item number 18. This is a public hearing on development standards in the PRD zone. This is to amend a portion of Article 22-7 of the Orem City Code pertaining to development standards in the PRD zone. Our presenter is Jason Bench.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Before you tonight, we've had some discussion as staff over the last few months about PRDs and PDs and other opportunities that we've looked at as far as increasing the density. A PRD can have a maximum of 7 units per acre. If they take out an existing house, they can actually get up to 8 units per acre. But we only require a sidewalk on one side. We don't allow the concept plan in a PRD to be approved and held to that standard. If somebody comes in and under today's ordinance and gets a PRD approved, 3 months down the road, they don't have to build to that concept plan. They can change it as long as they meet the standards of the PRD zone. And we felt, the staff, that if someone's going to get that additional density, they ought to have some rules like the PD that requires them to have that exhibit that they're tied to that elevation, they're tied to that floor plan or the site plan. And so as staff, we felt that we need to make some changes on the concept plan to require a concept plan if it's approved by the council, because it is a rezone to the PRD zone. They ought to be tied to the concept plan that they bring forward. And so as part of our initial idea behind this change is to require that the concept plan be attached as an exhibit in the ordinance, so that if they want to amend that in the future, they would have to come back to the council to make that change. As part of that, as we're looking at PRD zones, they are typically built with private streets. They typically only have a sidewalk on one side. And we felt if they're going to also, with that same mind frame, if you're going to have increased density, we ought to increase the walkability, the ability to have public streets. And so we've basically proposed that all PRD streets be public. That there's no question in the future if a developer that builds private streets 20 years down the road and there's maintenance issues, they come to the city that's built to a substandard street and want the city to take it over for maintenance. We felt that we ought to just resolve that issue now, require them to be public streets, and then the city over the lifetime of those streets would be maintaining those. And so that was another issue that we're bringing for you tonight, that any street in a PRD would be a public street. In addition to that, we would require that they would have a separated sidewalk. Typically, I can just show you an example of an existing PRD that was actually built to the standard that we're looking for all PRDs to go forward. You can see it has a separated sidewalk. And this is actually a public street in the Hidden Acres PRD zone, which is similar to this example here, which is an existing subdivision built to the local sublocal street standard. And so we felt that if a local typical subdivision is required to build this standard, then why not have a PRD that is allowed to have a higher density built to that same standard? And so that's why we're bringing this forward to you as well, that they have that separated sidewalk. Not only increases the walkability, but also then increases the pedestrian access based on the sidewalks and things, which I just talked about there. And then the other one is still have the ability to have a private drive. So if there's a portion of the property that can't be developed other than just a small access to access a few units, that there still has that ability or flexibility for a developer to use a private drive, but only have 4 units maximum on that access. Right now, deep lots, I'm sure you're familiar with the deep lot ordinance, we can only have 4 units off a deep lot, so that concept is kind of formulated into here to keep that as an option, but all the major streets be public. So as we just go through the ordinance, this is the concept plan. We require several standards to be included in that concept plan, in addition to that being part of Appendix RR, which would be then every PD or PRD that comes forward would be, their exhibit would be attached to that appendix and would be part of the ordinance as a permanent document in the ordinance itself. So the developer would be tied to what they're proposed to the council and not be able to change it without coming back to the council. The setbacks would be the same as a typical sublocal street. We're talking 1 foot difference versus the standard setback of 25 feet, which is typically taken from a foot back of the sidewalk, whereas a sublocal street is taken from the back of curb, and so it's a 1 foot difference in the setback. Basically, we want to make sure that because it's a separated sidewalk, you have an 8 foot planter strip, 5 foot sidewalk, we want to make sure that this house is set back far enough so that if a car parks in the driveway, it's not overhanging the sidewalk, and so that's the reasoning for the 32 feet to the garage, 29 feet if there's not a garage, which is what we do typically now with a sublocal street, which is any new subdivision that comes in is built to that sublocal street standard. So this matches that local street standard. Landscaping would outline that a tree every 40 feet would be required within that park strip, and so it would require these PRDs to be landscaped with a tree every 40 feet. Also, these public street standards would take effect January 6th. That was what was recommended by the Planning Commission. We would actually propose that be changed to February 1. We do have a PRD that's coming before you on the 26th. If this is approved tonight, January 6th, then that PRD that's proposed would not be allowed to be approved because they're proposing a private street, which was proposed prior to our making these recommendations. although their application is not vested until it comes before the council for the rezone, we felt that it'd be appropriate because they were in the process that we move that date to February 1st and allow them to come to the council. That doesn't require the council to approve it, but at least gives you the option to approve it prior to these standards of the public streets coming into effect. It still requires the minimum of 32 feet of asphalt for any projection. So when a rezone comes in, we're required to have a traffic study. If it's shown in the traffic study that it's going to produce less than 800 trips per day, then we would allow that 32 feet of asphalt. If it's a development that's going to have more than 800, then it would be required to have the 46 feet of asphalt. Sorry, a lot of information. Any questions that I can address so far?
Councilmember Sumner.
Will this affect the proposed housing on 8th South and 8th West? This change?
No, that would be a PD that they're proposing. This is a PRD. This has a these are set standards that has a maximum density of 7 units. They're proposing a PD, which would allow basically whatever they propose.
So this is not directed to them at all?
This is, this would affect like the projects, the Peach Haven, the Maple Place over here, or the 8th East projects that we have, that are basically the twin home type developments we've had recently coming through. That's what this affects.
So have we had cases where we've approved things and then they've gone a different direction? So in other words, this is making sure that whatever we approve will be carried forward. But have there been cases in the past where that has not occurred?
I think I can't recall right off the top of my head, but they basically haven't been bound to whatever they were approved by the council. So any PD, or PRD, excuse me, I keep saying PD, any PRD that has come forward to you had the option to change their plan without.
I was just wondering if that's happened.
I can't recall off the top of my head, but
you're trying to stay ahead of the game.
But yeah, basically we don't want to have that as an option any longer. We'd like to be them to be bound like a PD zone, bound to their concept plan. So they put a little more forethought into it rather than just getting it approved, get the PRD approved, and then come back and kind of bait and switch type thing. We'd rather not consider that.
Allow that to happen.
Right.
Thank you. Councilmember Lentz.
So I did have a question about a parking lot for a condo complex or a townhouse complex. That would their parking lot have to be essentially a public street at that point? But I think you might have addressed that when you said the maximum would be 7 units for the property. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, PRD is going to basically have homes like you see in this PRD on Hidden Acres. Basically the homes, twin homes or whatever, front actually the street. So they wouldn't necessarily have private parking lots. They would just be garages.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I had just a question.
Yes, Councilmember Seastrand.
So, Mr. Bench, if a PRD chooses or tries to convert the road back to a public street, is that something the city council approves, or is that something the city considers and makes the...
Typically they've asked the city, whether it's Public Works, whether it's our transportation individuals, and if it was built to public street standards and it is a public street, but it happens to be private, then they've had in the past considered taking that over. But some of these private streets were built to the width that was not current standards, and so and there's a lot of PRDs that have been approved over the years that don't meet city standards, and what we don't want is perpetuate that into the future. We'd rather have streets that were built to a standard that we know are public streets, and we don't have to have that discussion in the future.
What would be the reason or the benefit to the city to take over a private street and make it public? Is there some benefit to the city?
No, because typically they wait until it's 30 years old and dilapidated to a point where it would take a significant amount of money to bring it up, which is why we don't typically take over private streets.
Would this typically then encourage more of that to happen? Would we see the city taking over more, if they're to these standards and compliance, would we see more of these private streets then be requested for the city to take those over?
I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but we have had some requests, and we haven't, to my knowledge, taken any, since I've been here, taken over private streets and converted them to public.
Okay. It seems like if we're requiring them to meet public street standards so that it's easier to convert, that would be a natural.
Well, and that part of it, we haven't necessarily required them to do that because we've allowed them to do private street. I mean, we have street standards, but not necessarily the proper widths, the sidewalks and things like that would typically you would see, because current ordinance only allows or requires a sidewalk on one side. So we're saying if you want to meet the public street standard, which is only, back to the equity issue, if you're going to have a higher density development, you ought to have the similar standards or at least better standards than a typical subdivision would have because you're getting more density, which is why now we're saying, well, let's have sidewalks on both sides. Let's have it to a specific street standard that matches what we have currently for any other subdivision in the city.
Okay. Bill has a...
Yes, this ordinance wouldn't allow a private street. It would have to be a public street.
From the very beginning.
Yes.
Right, from going forward. So if we say February 1st, anything after that would have to be public streets.
And is that good? Is that good for the city, or, I mean?
Well, it's like a typical...
means we're doing the snow removal?
We are, but it's required to meet up front the city standards. So you got the road base, the asphalt widths, all those.
So just like any other normal neighborhood that we do.
Right, correct.
But that's part of it.
Yep.
Okay, so if there's no other, I'm sorry, Councilmember Spencer.
So Jason, with the proposal that's coming up in February, you want us to put it in February, that development would have a private street. So I'm not sure if you have anything you can show the council.
It's actually in your packet. The way I had it out in the pre-meeting gives you a concept plan of what they're proposing. There's a 9-unit proposal that has a turnaround in the back, which is what we've allowed in other areas in the city. But from after this development, assuming the council wants to approve it, we would not allow any of that.
So that would be the last private.
That would be the last private
street if you want to do that.
Yep, you can see it has a hammerhead and the 9 units access a private street. They have agreed to add sidewalks on both sides. We just don't have the separated.
I guess my concern would be fire, the fire engine getting down and turning around. I wouldn't be able to do that, so, and garbage, but.
And the only reason we're recommending that is because this was in the process well down the road before we decided to make these changes. We've been a little faster than they have, and so we've kind of got to this point prior to them getting to the council. And so in fairness, we thought we'd at least have the council consider that before we make that decision.
But you have no concerns on that development?
No, it basically meets the typical standards that we've approved the past 15 years, but we need to, I guess if we want to make that change, we'd rather have this one be the last and then move forward with no other ones.
Okay.
Greg, did you have a comment?
Yes, I was just going to respond to Mr. Seastrand's question about why we would do this. One of the things that we've encountered is that we sometimes get complaints from people that live on private streets. And they say, you know what, we pay the same taxes as my neighbor that's on a public street. My neighbor gets his street maintained, I don't get mine maintained. And a lot of these people don't realize when they buy their properties that their HOA is going to be paying for the street maintenance costs. And so some of it is kind of a fairness issue to the residents that buy in the PRDs.
I know I had a comment from somebody within the city that they were really upset about a very large pothole in front of a restaurant and thought it was the responsibility of the city, and it turns out it was the restaurant's land. So anyway, Councilmember Lentz.
Just one follow-up on the PRD zone that will be considered at the next meeting. Hypothetically, if that motion were to be continued to the next session, would that mean that effectively they would need to resubmit? So if we approve this for February 1st, allowing that proposal to be heard and for the council to vote, if we do that, we'd essentially need to decide at that next council meeting.
Right. Yeah, the other option, I guess, is to continue this item until the next meeting. But that, I mean. Yeah.
Okay. This is a public hearing, so if there's no further questions, we'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Anyone who would like to make a comment, please come forward. Hold your comments to 3 minutes. Give us your name and address, and we'll now open it up. Seeing there's no one coming forward, we'll go ahead and close it and bring it back to the council. Any further comments or questions for Jason?
Mayor,
Ms.
maybe
Ramey.
in consultation with Mr. Stevens, if there was a concern as it relates to going forward, we could say any development that is after this particular development under consideration would be subject to the new guidelines. So that would eliminate any future development prior to an effective date or from coming forward and requesting the same.
Right, so any application that's already been submitted would be considered under the old guidelines, but any future applications would be considered under the new ordinance.
And are there any other applications?
Not currently, no.
All right.
I can make a motion.
Okay.
Seems like it makes sense to me, so I will move that we amend a portion of Article 22-7. Am I doing the right one? Of the Orem City Code pertaining to the development standards in the PRD zone, and that all, how did you want me to say that, Greg? That all the future applications would be applicable to this new standard.
Correct, and any applications currently submitted would be considered under the previous standard.
That's what I meant.
Okay. I'll second that. Councilmember Debbie Luray.
Aye.
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 Okay, the ordinance passes.
Just clarification, so the date stays January 6th, or did we change it to February 1st? Or does it matter?
We're basing it on applications that have already been received by the...
So it stays the same.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you, Jason. We'll now consider item 19, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Orem outlining their support for adoption of the 2015 International Energy Conservation Code and other possible air quality enhancements for Utah. And Ryan Clark is our presenter.
All right, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Ryan Clark with the city's Economic Development Division. Tonight I'm here to discuss air pollution, which might seem like an odd topic for economic development, but later in my presentation you'll see why there's a connection. The Utah State Legislature will consider an update to Utah's building codes in the next legislative session. It will be a prime opportunity to adopt new and improved energy conservation codes. I'm here to ask for your support by resolution to encourage the state legislature to adopt the 2015 International Energy Conservation Code as part of the next Utah Building Code update. So to give you some background on this matter, I'll cover some of these following items. I'll discuss the Utah Valley Clean Air Task Force, the inversion problem that we currently face, contributing factors to the inversions, and then the code itself, and then finally with the resolution. So the City of Orem is a member of the Utah Valley Clean Air Task Force. The task force was established in early 2014 by the Utah Valley Chamber. At the time, Val Hale was the head of the chamber, and he organized the task force and put it together. Provo City is also a member, as well as other government organizations and private business representatives attend as well. The task force has been involved in developing programs to help clean up our air or to help our air quality improve. During this time, they've implemented a Clean Air Pledge program, which you can see at the top of the screen. It's a card that is distributed by members that are participating, and there's also a pin that goes with that card. I'm wearing one on my tie tonight. If anyone would like one, I'd be happy to get you one. But it's for those that have taken the Clean Air Pledge and has agreed to do some of those items that are outlined, which include parking and walking instead of using a drive-up window during the inversion season, consolidating your vehicle trips, walking to places that you can instead of driving your car for 500 feet, things such as that. So as I've participated in this, I've gained my conscience really troubles me at times, and so I don't use a lot of drive-through windows anymore. I'll park in the parking lot and go inside. So it does seem to work. As part of that, we've received donated billboard time from some of the billboard companies where the picture you see at the bottom has been broadcast on those billboards to help remind people of the clean air situation or of the inversion season. And then there is an air quality flag set program that's been rolled out. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, promotes this flag program, and we have one out on our city center flagpole right now that's flying yellow, and the flag color represents the forecasted air quality for the next day. So today is a yellow air day, which hopefully will not lead to an orange, which then leads to a red. We've yet to have a red air day this year. And we like to think that the task force has had something to do with that. So we haven't had a red air day since the task force was put together. But as you're driving by, take a look at the city center. Alpine School District has had these flags distributed, and so has Provo's School District. And so it's flying yellow because tomorrow is designated as a yellow air day. Another accomplishment is working with UTA. They installed thermometers at their bus transfer stations, and those thermometers remind their drivers of the regulations that they face as a UTA driver, that when a certain temperature is reached, they're not supposed to idle their buses as they're waiting for people. So I believe it's 35 degrees. So if it reaches 35 or lower, they're to shut their buses off. All of this has to do with the inversions. We all know they're an issue every winter, and they cause health problems, but they also affect economic development. And we have had businesses visit Utah that have been evaluating locations for new headquarters or business expansion, and they have eliminated Utah from their list due to the inversions. That alone has been enough to take us off the list. What contributes to the inversions? We all know automobiles are the largest source of contaminants, but not many people realize homes and buildings are a large contributor also. And those numbers vary a little bit depending on what study you look at and which source you quote. So this year, as the legislature looks at updating the building code, we have an opportunity to include the 2015 Energy Conservation Code. That code has requirements that include increasing the R value, which is most often an increase in insulation in your ceilings in your walls, thicker walls on your residential units, your duct runs in your attic that deliver your heating and your air conditioning require insulation around them, and also to ensure there's not leakage going on where you're losing air into your attic. And then also, right now, there's not a high efficiency lighting requirement at all, and the new requirement would be 75% of a new building is to be energy efficient as far as lighting goes. There is a big disadvantage that many will point to, and that is the cost to a new home. And a study has been completed by the U.S. Department of Energy, and they found that it'll cost $1,000 to $3,000 for a new home. However, there is an advantage with that cost, and that advantage is that an average homeowner will save around $300 per year in utility costs. So based on this study, that after you add in those upfront costs and additional costs into your mortgage, you'll have a little bit of a higher payment at first, but within 2 years, you'll become what they call cash flow positive, where the savings will equal out to what your increased payment is, and from that point forward, you'll be in the positive. The other advantages is will reduce CO2, PM 2.5, and ozone, and then these homes will require less energy, like Rocky Mountain Power and Questar, and so they will not need to develop as much infrastructure for newer homes than they have traditionally for the homes that we have now. So the resolution that's before you is asking for your support in addressing. We would send a copy of the resolution to the state legislature, to the Speaker of the House, President of the Senate, and to the clerk, and then also to the news resource organizations out there to help publicize that this has been adopted. I'd also like to note that Provo City passed this very similar resolution in December, and so they are on board with this also. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the council for any questions.
Any comments, questions? Yes, Councilmember.
Ryan, have we had any specific Orem businesses that are inversion or terrible air has been the reason that they've not chosen to locate here, or is that mostly a Salt Lake problem?
At this time, we haven't had anyone specific to Orem. I've just heard this from EDC Utah as they've had site visits to state in general.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments? Councilmember Lentz.
So with the city of Orem making a recommendation to the state legislature, are there any policies or guidelines found in the code that we would want to suggest that they modify to suit the needs of the citizens of Utah, the citizens of Orem? Is there any flexibility or guidelines to allow for that kind of flexibility to adapt to geographies, populations, and so forth?
From what I understand, the study that was completed was based upon the climate zones that these changes are recommended to. So in Utah, and Bill Bell could maybe answer this as the chief building official. He has a little bit more knowledge than I do, but from what I understand, these recommendations are based on what the climate is in Utah and what the specific code requirements would be.
Yes, Bill.
And there are ways to change the code. You have to go through the Uniform Building Code Commission at the state. And if it's a legitimate change, they'll hear that, study it, and then give it to the legislature to amend it out of the code.
Okay, Councilmember McDonald.
Councilmember Lentz in our pre-meeting discussed the fact that none of us have fully read this code. Can we pass some other resolution that says we recommend you do all you can to improve air quality, including the adoption of code, without saying we're recommending this specific code since we don't know all the details in it?
That is something that would be acceptable if you're interested in doing so. I don't see a problem. I think it would accomplish the same.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? It's my understanding we have James Christensen in the crowd, who's the father of Peter Christensen. Do you want to make a comment? Peter contacted us with regards to this code. I don't know if you're involved with that or not. No? Okay. I'm sorry, maybe we've got the wrong gentleman. I was informed of somebody that his father was here in the crowd. One thing that I feel, and I'm not quite sure how we would look at doing this with what was just said, but I would like to have this recommendation stating that it's, that it meets the needs of Utah and the requirements of our community. And I haven't read the code. I mean, we're recommending that they adopt this code. I understand it's 1,100 pages. I hate to recommend we adopt something that I haven't read.
Well, if I could add, we're not recommending that they adopt the 1,000-page building code. We're recommending that they implement the energy conservation code, which is a much smaller item, which is summarized in the presentation with those values that were included.
Okay. So, I mean, it states here to request, it's requested that the council outline their support for adoption of this code and other possible air quality enhancements for Utah. So I'm not quite sure how to word that per se. I mean, I can come up with my own wording, but.
Just another point of clarification. The state has already adopted this code, the 2009 version.
Okay.
And so the code has some changes in it from then, but the code is already in effect, the 2009, for all commercial structures in Utah. The residential code goes back a little further, it's 2006 version. So it's not like this is a brand new code being adopted. Just to help.
But it is an improved code being adopted.
The code goes through a 3-year code cycle, and there's a few changes submitted to each code cycle. And those changes typically are to improve energy conservation.
So the legislature's already passed it, and we're recommending our support that they pass the new additions to the code, the new improvements to the code?
Yes. So before the legislature this session will be this 2015 version of the 2009 that's already in effect. So,
So personally, on my behalf, I'm not comfortable recommending it unless I've read it. I would be happy to read it. I'd be happy to continue this until I could read it, but I really don't want to recommend something that I haven't read. So with that said, Councilmember McDonald.
Mayor, I wonder if you and the others and I would be comfortable with something like this. I'm going to try an attempt at wordsmithing. That the City Council, by resolution, support air quality enhancements for Utah, period. And in addition, it is recommended the City Council instruct staff to transmit copies of that resolution, which is just a resolution to support air quality to the President of the Senate, et cetera, but not specifically reference the code. Would that do roughly the same thing?
What are we sending? What are you saying we're sending?
Resolution that the City Council support air quality enhancement.
I got that part of it.
Period. And then the rest of it just like that. That we send a letter to these various people mentioned that we support air quality enhancements for Utah.
I'm fine with that. I'm not fine recommending a code that I have not read. So
right.
I'd like to point out that in the packet there was information on the code, but nevertheless, Councilman McDonald, time is of the essence. The legislature will be starting soon, so I don't know that there's time to delay. So your recommendation is much better than nothing.
You want to make a motion?
I'll try to do this again. I move that the City Council, by resolution, support air quality enhancement for Utah. Period.
County.
And what's that?
All of Utah or Utah County? All of Utah.
It's for all of Utah.
Okay. So, and recommend, and we instruct staff to transmit copies of our resolution to the President of the Utah Senate, to the Speaker of the Utah House of Representatives, to the Clerk of the Legislature, and to the news media, to include the Herald, Salt Lake Tribune, and Deseret News.
So I would second that resolution.
Do you think we need to specifically recognize this?
No, I'm not making reference to that code at all.
Okay.
Just motherhood, apple pie, and air quality.
Okay. So, Councilmember Luray, we'll go with you first.
Aye.
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 Proposed resolution passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, item number 20 is a resolution adopting the Canyon View, Orchard, and Cascade Neighborhood Plan and amending the City of Orem General Plan to include the Canyon View, Orchard, and Cascade Neighborhood Plan as Appendix C. Our presenters are Jason Bench and Brandon Stocksdale. And Jason and Brandon, would you like to introduce those with you and what they represent?
So I'll let Brandon.
Who they represent.
I'll let Brandon introduce them in just 1 minute, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just a couple of background notes on these neighborhood plans. It's been several years in the making, even before Brandon came on board our staff. Bill and I met and decided that something that we wanted to do is do these neighborhood plans. And so with the hiring of Brandon and his ability to have full-time ability to get into these plans and have these neighborhood meetings and different things, get on the ground level with these neighborhoods to set this plan in motion. This basically brings together this first plan of many plans. Over the next 5 years, you're going to probably be tired of us coming before you with these neighborhood plans, but this is the first plan that we're bringing forward to you, and it really shows that we've had opportunity to meet many times, and you'll see these wonderful neighbors that we've met with. They've contributed greatly to this plan, and we're hoping to continue that with all these other neighborhoods to encourage the commitment, to encourage the involvement, to really be a grassroots level plan that we can have instead of an overall general plan, which we also have, to have these specific neighborhood plans to help us pinpoint areas of concern within these neighborhoods on a specific level rather than a macro level. And so it's really been a great process. This is the wonderful opportunity for us to be here tonight. And I'm going to turn the time to Brandon to introduce the people next to him and also introduce his slideshow, and then we'll be able to address any questions that you might have.
Great. Well,
Good evening, and I'm back. But Jason, I think, did a pretty good explanation, took most of the wind out of my sails. But like you said, it's been a great opportunity for us as a staff to go out into the community. And, we have a number of citywide, large, long-range planning projects going on. This has been an opportunity for us to now go more in towards the neighborhoods and with smaller groups of residents and neighbors and community stakeholders to work with them on securing and promoting their vision for their neighborhood and having a process in place to be able to put that into code and to work long-term towards that. So I have 3 of our advisory committee members here today. I was going to give them a moment to introduce themselves and their role and experience as being a part of the advisory committee over the last almost year now in developing this plan. So if I think we've already covered these purposes of the plan, but again, just to support the city council's purpose of promoting harmony and communication and proper planning with the community, to help us again go down into that community level and as local level as possible, really down to the block throughout the city, to identify what those concerns are and to start coming up with solutions for correcting those. It's been a great opportunity for us to improve our citywide communication with our residents, both through traditional open houses, neighborhood meetings, and opportunities like that, but also through trying new means and opportunities. Our Mind Mixer and My Sidewalk pages, our social media, we've gone to back to school nights, which I'm sure Mickey would love to talk about. He loves bringing up that experience. and just other venues to reach out to our neighbors and to get more people informed and involved into how to plan for the future of our community. And then again, to apply these large, long-range citywide plans that we have to the community level. So, and I think that this plan represents all of these efforts. It's a succinct document that somebody, new to Orem can pick up and say, I know nothing about my neighborhood, and by looking through the maps and the graphics and some of the data that's in there, have a very clear understanding of this is what my neighborhood is like, this is what our priorities are, and this is what we hope our neighborhood will be like for the next 10 years. And that was really our major goal with this process. So as I said, a huge part of that was the public outreach effort, and we used a number of tools, both traditional means and some new methods, and we're able to reach out to far more people than maybe we have been able to in the past. And I hope that it's a trend that we can continue to do, to be able to maybe identify some of these concerns before they're concerns, and to plan for them today. So as I said, part of our process was forming an advisory committee where we reached out to school principals, business owners, neighborhood and action chairs, residents, and anybody who would listen to me and not chase me away, and who would be willing to come and meet. And we met every month for about 9 or 10 months, and every month we covered a different topic, a different issue, a different concern, and we were able to get all of that, solicit all of that feedback. And then the other part of that was every month I would invite a different department from the city to come in and speak to what they do. So we had our transportation engineer, we had our economic development director, we had our neighborhood preservation unit officers come. And they could engage with them and answer their questions and say, this is what's going on in your neighborhood and throughout the city. And it was a great opportunity to share that information and to get them involved. So with that, I'll turn over a couple of minutes over to our committee members to maybe speak to introduce themselves and to speak to their experience as being a part of this process and maybe answer any questions that you have. I know that I presented on this plan last month to the council, and I think you're fairly familiar with it. But if we can answer any questions, we'd be happy to. So whoever would like to go first.
Oh, thank you. My name is Diane Fraser, and I live on the corner of 12th North and 600 East. And when this first came up, I thought, well, what's going on? I've seen all this changes in Orem and wondering, does anyone really know what they're doing? I know that you do. It was a really fun experience. Got to know people in our area and got to see what really goes on with the city, how you go about changing things, making decisions, and that you let us input how we felt about our neighborhood, what we would like to see, how it is going to be changing in the future. That was really neat. It was really fun. And Brandon's a really cool guy to work with. He was a lot of fun. It was really fun to get to know these people.
It's going to go to his head.
I know. That's okay. So,
Anyway. So my name is Katrina Larson. I live in the Canyon View neighborhood with my husband and 5 children. I got involved because I was curious enough about an insert in my utility bill about planning in my neighborhood, about what issues there needed to be planning about, that I called Brandon, who invited me to be on the committee, and I was still curious, so I went ahead and got involved. I hope I contributed something, but I did want to speak, as Brandon said, to the benefits of the process of convening an advisory committee and what I gained from that, and hopefully, by extension, my neighbors gained from hearing about it. I think there are 3 areas. The first is confidence. Like Diane, I gained a lot of confidence in the city and the system, just seeing things like traffic studies and the sense that there is a lot of thought and effort going into the planning, and when there's construction somewhere, there's a reason. Those kinds of things build confidence in the city and in the process, similar to the public works study that we discussed in tonight's meeting. But the second thing is context. Brandon presented a lot of information about what other cities are doing around the country. It was interesting to see how we compared and what the possibilities were, as well as a historical context. Gave us a better sense of what previous generations have done and invested in that we now benefit from, and what we then maybe have an obligation to invest in for future generations. The third thing is community, and again, like Diane, it was a great experience for me to get to know some of my neighbors, but also some of the members of the city staff and various areas of city functioning. As a result of being involved in this committee, I was also able to participate in the Citizens Academy with some of you. That was also very educational and eye-opening and confidence building in what we have going on as a city, and the good people we have involved in the good programs and things that are happening. But in addition to just getting to know people, I also learned a lot about what resources are available on the website and ways to be involved, just from commenting online to actual committees that you can be involved in. And I think that's a good way to populate those committees, you know, having people involved in something that's very personal, their neighborhood, and then learning about the other ways that you can contribute and be involved, I think is helpful. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope I contributed, but I certainly gained a lot.
I'm Mickey Cochran, and I live on the corner of 640 North and 750 East, so it's in the Orchard neighborhood. And I went to that first meeting last year when that came out. You know, I usually read my email or read the things from the city. I know many of you will be amazed at that. And the one question that I have for you, where are the chained leopards? It was just an aside. I just thought I'd put that in there. So when that came in the mail, I said, well, this affects my neighborhood. So I went down, and I usually try to be involved. And there were quite a few people that showed up at that first meeting. And so Brandon accepted my offer of assistance, and we just went out. We met monthly. We talked about various issues. We were asked to go out and look at some things, report back, which we did. We got involved. We were able to speak with neighbors. And then Brandon said, well, can any of you like to come and volunteer with the back to school nights? And I said, of course I would. You know, I got time. What a riot. I had a great deal of fun, but there are so many, as you know, different opinions. But all of the people that came to those particular meetings, and having participated in back to school myself, I knew that the people who were there were concerned about their families and their neighborhoods. And they gave some really good feedback that has been incorporated into the neighborhood plans. So we were able to meet one-on-one. Brandon did an excellent job. He had materials there. He wasn't as, and if I'm going to say Brandon, you know, he wasn't as, you were really serious for the most part. But the people took a like to that because they were getting input into the process. Now, if we can duplicate this across the other 9 neighborhoods, which actually represents 19 of the neighborhoods in Orem, I think we're going to have so many people involved in bettering this community as this process goes along. So my thanks to you, of course, and we got to participate in the birth of his first child. Also, Well, we didn't participate. That's not what I meant. You know that. The baby was, well, it doesn't matter. With Jason and a lot of the other city people. We've been able to direct a lot of people toward the appropriate organizations that the city has and the appropriate services that the city has to bring them answers to questions that they have to appropriately, to see things better, not just to have. This is one other thing I'd like to say. These are people that really care about the community, who are willing to listen, who are willing to talk, who are willing to learn, not those who come in with a preconceived notion like you usually see at a lot of the city council meetings. Doesn't matter what you say, you're wrong when I'm talking about you guys, not me. Just don't go to my children with that. And that's, I think, going to build the community for us, and that's what we need to do. Get more people on board.
I agree.
Great if you could have a Mickey.
Yep. Who is it now?
That's your job.
Well, as they said, it was a great opportunity to work with our neighbors, to see people that want to better their community and to be a part of that process. It really was a community-driven process. The advisory committee was able to craft this vision statement, speaking to their concerns and their goals of improving safety in the neighborhood, of making good land use decisions, of preserving that single-family character of the neighborhood, improving access to parks. And then from this vision statement, we were able to take that into making objectives and then specific action items, working through the city and its planning process and incorporating the different plans, our bike and trails plan, our State Street plan, our transportation plan, and others, and being able to have these specific action items to help us as city staff and to be able to provide better recommendations and better guidance and better ideas to the city council as you make decisions pertaining to these neighborhoods. And so overall, just the emphasis that how this was a community-driven process, and it was great to be a part of that and to see what their concerns are, and to see that Orem is a great place and most people want to see it stay that way. In fact, I would say all people want to see it stay that way. And I think this provides a good opportunity for that. So again, we're able to identify neighborhood strengths and come up with policies on how to preserve those attributes, to identify what some of those concerns may be, safety around schools and access to recreational facilities and beautifying our neighborhoods and maintaining the quality and preserving those neighborhoods. And it gave us a chance to really inventory and look under look at these neighborhoods under a microscope and to see what those trends are and identify the best places for growth and identify the best policies for preservation, identify the most appropriate accommodations that we can make for the neighborhoods. And these are just some of the findings that you've seen before. And again, I think the most important part of any plan is a successful and manageable implementation section. And so this has been broken down into those specific objectives and specific action items that different departments or staff members can then use and consider as we move forward, and provides a mechanism for us to evaluate how we're doing in working with the community to achieve these goals. So our goal then is that we have this plan that's been completed, and we present it to you for your adoption as part of the city's general plan. We are about midway through our second neighborhood plan, and we'll be starting our third one at the end of the month. So it's been an exciting process, and in 5 years we hope to get through all of them. By that point, we'll probably start over again and start updating them. It's been a great opportunity.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the council? Councilmember Sumner.
How are these, this is a great plan. I appreciate you guys putting all this together. How is a funding mechanism put in to this, or is it just kind of as you go, or on these improvements? Because I'm sure there's going to be dollars associated with.
Sure. So in our implementation section, that's actually one of the specific items that we talk about is potential funding sources. Part of that is just incorporating in objectives from plans that we already have. So example, our Bike and Trails Master Plan states that as roads are resurfaced and improved, that they should certain roads should be striped with certain bike facilities, whether it's bike lanes or whatnot. So just making sure that these facilities are identified in our capital improvement plan, and as these improvements are made, that they've been identified. Other things that we did was I looked at different potential grant funding sources. Whether it's CDBG or UDOT has Safe Routes to School. These other sources. There's a recreational trails program that the state does that maybe we can look at for doing trail improvements or beautification or working with Utah County. So our goal is to, like I said, try to identify some of those sources that we could look at.
Thank you. Great job.
So yeah, for example, one of the improvements that we saw kind of right off the bat that was brought to our attention through this process was there's a sidewalk missing on the south side of 800 North at about 10th East. And so that was brought up by the committee, and I took that and went to our transportation engineer, who then took that to our monthly coordination meeting with UDOT, and that was identified as a concern, and UDOT has been able to identify funds for that, and they're doing now sidewalk and drainage improvements and putting in a sidewalk on that part of the road. So we've already seen some things happen, and that's been exciting to see.
Very good.
So, just a question, where is that picture taken?
This front one here?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember it's in the Orchard neighborhood. I can't remember the specific address.
10th East. I think it's looking across 10th East.
Okay.
I think it's actually been cut.
You're still in Welch's.
I can't recall. I took a number of photos, and
I know a bunch of the orchards. It just looks a little.
Oh, I think it's right on.
I don't know that I recognize it.
it is in Orem, because it is in these neighborhoods. I can tell you that,
Okay.
but I couldn't give you an exact address.
Yeah, and what are those by the trees? Are those heaters, beehives? What are those? Anyway, just an interesting picture.
All right.
So, well, so we very much appreciate what's gone on and what you're doing, and I think it's a great, Mickey, as you said, I think this is a great plan moving forward. So, would someone like to make a motion? All right, I'll make it. I recommend that the Canyon View, Orchard, and Cascade Neighborhood Plan, and let's see, approve, I'm sorry. I recommend that we approve, City Council approve the Canyon View, Orchard, and Cascade Neighborhood Plan and amend the City of Orem General Plan by adopting the Canyon View, Orchard, and Cascade Neighborhood Plan as Appendix C. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Councilmember Spencer.
Aye.
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 Okay, that passes. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service.
Show a little enthusiasm next time, please. Huh?
Thank you, Brandon and Jason. Jamie, do we have any city manager info?
Mayor, just to note that the legislative session is set to kick off on the 25th of January. We do have an opportunity to participate in cooperation with the Utah League of Cities and Towns as part of their legislative policy committee. I just thought I'd brief you on some of the issues that they're looking into this year as part of the legislative process. This year, police body cameras will continue to be something of interest to the legislature, and I would anticipate a number of bills. In fact, I'm already aware of 2 of them that are available for you to view. If you go onto utah.gov, under the legislature section of utah.gov, they do have a web page where you can actually pull up all of the legislation. Transportation will be another topic of conversation, maybe a little bit of a revisit to Proposition 1 and HB 362. As you well know, that transportation proposition went before many voters in a number of Utah counties, and unfortunately it did not pass in a number of counties, including Utah and Salt Lake County. I would anticipate additional discussion and dialogue relative to that.
What's interesting is 10 out of the 17 counties passed it. The 2 largest did not.
Did not. Now, from what I've heard to this point, there is not an interest in revisiting an HB 362 and carving out the transit piece of it. The Speaker of the House has said he's not necessarily interested in doing that, but I would anticipate that there will be conversation about transportation this session. Land use is always a topic of discussion, including impact fees. We're watching a couple of bills relative to impact fees. Water will, of course, also be a topic of discussion, and it always is. The other topic that will gain quite a bit of conversation, probably some traction this year, is sales tax and the tax of goods that are sold on the internet. Yep. Senator Bramble, who obviously represents Orem, has been quite vocal in suggesting we need to find a solution as a state. As you look at the number of online sales happening today versus 5 years ago versus 10 years ago, it is on the steep incline. And it's a concern to us as a city because obviously we reap a great amount of the resources necessary to run the community from sales tax. And while we are pleased to see growth in our sales tax base, it's not at the same rate as it used to be. And we are seeing more and more of our residents, our citizens shop online. It's no surprise if you ask any of you. I'm sure the level of your Christmas shopping this year on sites like Amazon.com was a lot greater than maybe even 3 years ago. Councilmember McDonald.
Some of the businesses have said, hey, we're in favor of it, those who do online, but acknowledge we put less stress on the city. We require less of their services because we don't have stores there, et cetera, et cetera. Has the Utah League of City and Towns or anyone else opined on that? If 6.5 is the normal, that it should only be 2 or 3 or some other amount? Have they talked to that?
You know, a number of years ago, an effort was made and actually was successful. Governor Huntsman removed sales tax on food, kind of the acknowledgement that, hey, there are some things that we shouldn't necessarily be assessing a sales tax on. That conversation is kind of now going the other way.
But that's different than a grocery store still requires police service and fire and protection, whereas someone just dropping something off on my box, yes, we have to have streets for the ambulance driver to come, but what else do we need to provide?
You know, and what we're seeing is, for example, in the retail market, we're not necessarily seeing retailers go away completely, but they're downsizing their stores and they're so there still is obviously a significant retail market, and in fact, we have new retailers that are coming to this market, but no one really understands long-term how all of this is going to play out. But no, there hasn't been a conversation as should there be consideration for those who are...
Different tax rate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I was going to say the amount of money that is being lost, you're talking $800 million to $1 billion for the state of Utah?
Yeah, I mean, I think yesterday Senator Bramble mentioned at least $185 million, I think. And, you know,
a lot more, but
the state has what's interesting is the state has a surplus this year, as you've probably read in the newspaper, but a lot of that money is one-time type resources. In many of the respects, they're facing and are being blessed with the same situation we are. We have some one-time money that's the result of building, development, job growth, so on and so forth. But the concern is it's not necessarily sustainable to the level that we need it to be to provide all of our core services. For the state, it's everything from education to Medicare to obviously some of the same needs we have relative to transportation and public safety and things like that. So I would anticipate a significant conversation this year about sales tax.
I was going to say, but the trend is what you need to watch. Not just today, but the trend and what direction it's going. And I know Senator Bramble is, I believe, the president of the chairman of the National Legislative Group.
Yeah, he is, and I can't remember the exact language.
And so they're trying to get on board with what they're trying to do in the U.S. Senate and the House, which they've been trying to do for a couple of years now.
Yeah. So obviously we have a few more days to prepare, and we will invite obviously our legislative delegation to join us for breakfast as well. I've extended an invitation to Craig and Ryan Peterson, who represent us up at the legislature as well, to share some thoughts as to what they see happening. And I've had some conversations with them already as to areas of focus, things that I'd like them to be mindful of this next legislative session. More often than not, we find ourselves playing defense, not offense, and I wouldn't expect this session to be much different.
Well, thank you for inviting him, though. That'll be great to have him meet with us.
We also have Cameron Deal coming from the Utah League of Cities and Towns, so we'll have a variety of perspectives.
Great. Thank you. If there's nothing else, I would accept a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
Ernest?
Sorry. Oh, you're fine. Is that right? I thought it was somebody else, but
No. Brent, what would you like?